Okay, hello out there in internet land. Welcome to our hangout for talking about Harry Potter. Many Harry Potters.
Many Harry Potters.
Many Harry Potters, 3 books in one hangout. It's going to be intense. I figured though it can't be any worse than trying to do all 3 of the Wool books in one go. So yeah. At least these are children's books, so that helps at least a little bit.
Yeah.
So I thought we'd start off tonight with something that they do on the Oh Witch Please podcast, which, by the way, apart from Liv, does anybody else listen to that?
I listened to the first episode.
I've listened to like the first 3 or 4.
Okay.
I haven't heard of it because I've been out of the loop, so you'll have to send me the link later, Mel.
Yeah, no, you definitely need to listen to it. It's very, very good. As far as podcasts go. So they start off their podcast with talking about any special stories they've got for the books editions that they've got, so where they got them, why they're special, things like that. Doesn't anybody have any stories along those lines they'd like to share?
I think I already shared my story with all my pictures of my first edition one.
Oh, so cool.
Karina, share here so that everybody knows the story and it's recorded in the hangout for posterity.
Well, I might go grab it off the other bookshelf then because I didn't bring them in here with me, so I will be right back.
Okay. Anybody else with the story? I'll share my very boring story, which is that these are brand new, these 3. So these 3 I've actually never read before. I had my first 2 books, so I had paperbacks of the first 2 that my aunt gave me, and I had for about 2 years before when the 4th book came out, there was a lot of hype. And I went, hang on, those books look familiar. And I pulled them off my shelves. I was at uni learning to be a teacher at the time. That's why my aunt had given them to me because she was a teacher, and she was like, you should read these books, they'll be great for your teaching career. I'm like, okay. So I had paperbacks from the first ones, and then I had hardbacks for all the rest of them, and them not matching. So when Borders went bust, they had these on special, and I went, blink. So that's my very boring story. Anybody else?
I bought them on Kindle, and just really fascinating for me that Amazon had them, but obviously the power of J.K. Rowling means that you have to buy the Rowling, however it's pronounced. You actually have to buy them through Pottermore, so it's a bit more of a protracted experience. So part of me was like, oh, but part of me was also like, yeah, go Joe, you know, like you don't have to bow down to Amazon. So that was it was an interesting experience for me, and actually it was quite smoothly done considering. So anyone who is interested in the Kindle ones, it was quite good.
So do you go to Pottermore and sign into your Kindle account?
So when you go to Amazon, it basically says it's here, but you have to, and it sends you via a link to Pottermore. I had to join Pottermore, and then I had to give them my, basically said that, so like when you give them your Facebook stuff, you just go, this is my Amazon account, and there was the ability to buy it, and just sends them automatically, which is really good. There did seem to be some kind of limit on how many times you can download it. I don't know if that's true for Amazon or if it's just a Pottermore thing. So that was curious, but it was all pretty seamless, and you get this interesting thing called Wordwise, which is, I'm constantly looking up words on my Kindle, and often like on real books, I like sometimes forget it's a real book, and I hover over a word thinking I can find out what the word means and forget that I'm on a Kindle. But it's like a really good step for kids, I think. It's like a great way to help children learn about different words. So it's called Wordwise, which I thought was really neat. And they've got like a hint system to help kids learn what the words mean, so that kind of stays with them. So that was really cool for the teachers among us. So, yeah. So that's my story. It's not really relatable, but yeah. Back to accidentally Dot.
I'm glad that's catching on.
Totally.
What do I love about it, though?
I call you Dot. I'm like, my friend Dot.
I actually kind of really appreciate that. Sorry.
I love how people I love how people who didn't know you before call you Dot, and I'm like, just shut up, Melanie. You don't need to explain it.
It's really funny, and I'm not changing it back. It's just a thing now. I don't have my name changed on here though because it's connected to my email address, and I don't want to send professional emails as .Ferguson. That seems not maybe the best idea. Maybe I should just make a separate Google account. I don't know. Anyway, I first read the books when I think I was in year 4. And
What's that
so
for the older plebs who come from New Zealand? What kind of age range is that? I don't know what that means.
5, 6, 7, 9-ish, 9 or 10.
Yeah.
And our school librarian sort of said, we've got these books in, has anyone read them, and introduced them to us. And I borrowed the 3rd one first because it looked the most interesting to me. Typical me, let's not read anything in order, and realised that was a terrible idea, and went and got the first ones and read them in the proper order and fell in love with them. And when I was growing up, I would reread them so often. Like, I'd finish up to where the series had finished and then just start again, and I'd like time how quickly I could get through the books, which is why my books look like this. Like, that is the little plastic covery bit hanging off of the front of my first book. And the first few pages are taped back inside, and my phone number from when I was a kid is still on these stickers. And I thought it was only the first one that was in such horrendous condition, but it's actually all of them. Like, it's peeling, the corners are peeling off of all of them, because while I read, I sit there with my fingernails and run the corners of the book along my fingernails, which is really gross, but that's how all of my books end up like that. And even Azkaban, which is a hardcover, all along the edge of it is all funny as well, where I've picked at it and read it so many times. And because I was so worried about the condition of the first book, which the cover's actually peeling off completely, I went and bought a new edition of the first book just so that I wouldn't wreck it.
What do you think of the
That's how worried I
artwork for the new one?
It's really childish. I don't love it. I don't like the font change. It's real, like, it's such a huge change. But the biggest issue that I had was when you open it up, the title page doesn't have the Hogwarts emblem there anymore that says Draco Dormiens Nunc Quam Tedlandus on it. It's not there. And I just went, oh my god, that's such a huge part of, why did you remove this from the books? And they sort of made up for it by adding a map. Like, there's a map in it now, which is nice.
Still,
whether
taking
I
out...
want that.
Well, where's my Hogwarts symbol?
Yeah.
And all of the letters from the kids in the back of the books, I don't think there's some in the first one, but there are in the other ones. There's no letters from kids.
They took those away earlier than that, because my editions, which are the exact, like, they're pretty similar to what you've got, like I had the originals like you do, they have no letters in the back. All they've got is one on the back flap.
Do you also have the Smarties Award on them?
No, mine original one did.
Wow.
It says at the bottom, though, the Triple Smarties Gold Award winner. So it's got it on the bottom, but it doesn't have the big gold symbol in that. So they republished it with the same covers and that, but they took out the letters and things, which I'm like, that was one of my favourite parts.
I know, I loved reading all the kids' letters.
Anybody else with a story?
I have all the originals. Okay, so I have all the...
Sorry, go live.
It's alright. I have all the originals, but the first one, the Philosopher's Stone, is still in Alice Springs, so I still have never got a new copy of that. That's the main reason why I have never reread the series. So there you go. That's my story. Bye.
Wait. You've only read it once before?
No, last year or the year before I started to go through it again, but I had read the first one on Kindle, so I've never reread through the whole series again, so this is my first proper reread. Yeah.
How?
See, I'm with
all
you,
because
Karina, I read it lots and lots of times over and over again, except for I don't have the excuse of being young when I did it. I did it when I was in my 20s.
My best friend and I redid it again when we were about 21, 22.
Mm.
So it's not just something that I did as a teenager, it's something that I did, post high school as well.
Awesome. I'm not alone. Naomi, do you have a story?
Yes, mostly just with the first one because I had it for so long before I got to read the rest of the series. It stayed in my school backpack and got wet, and so the pages are all warped. So like all the pages are all funky looking, and it's like all this the binding at the side isn't even anymore. Like it's not flat across the side because the middle of the binding isn't flat anymore. So it's it's not falling apart, but it's been in my school bag so much that some of the pages are interesting, but I would never get rid of it because it's mine.
See, I still can't quite believe I did that. I actually disposed of my original 2, and I'm like, why did I do that? I had the original random dude instead of Dumbledore on the back.
Oh,
Yeah, see,
wow.
mine has proper Dumbledore, but yes, it stayed in my school bag so much that it went really dodgy looking. Like I had it. It was my security blanket at school. So it was the thing I had. But because I always had like a frozen water bottle in my backpack, wrapped in a tea towel, sometimes too much moisture would like come off it, and it's how it got wet and all warped and sad looking.
That's what my brother did to one of my Kelly Armstrong books. I nearly killed him. I was so angry. I haven't lent him a book since. I think he was about 12 when he did it, and I just went, oh my god, you've destroyed one of my books. I never lend people books. What's wrong with you? And he hasn't borrowed a book since.
It was for that exact reason, because I was in Darwin, so I used to have frozen drink bottles all the time too. It was that exact reason that I had a special little paper bag that someone had given me for a present, like with a present in it once, and that's what I used to carry my books in. It was the exact size for carrying a book in, and I'd go to and from school with my little bag with my book inside of it.
Well, this is the only book that it ever happened to. Like, all my textbooks I ever had in my backpack, nothing. Just this one.
Books.
Textbooks were like up against the water bottle all day, every day. I had other books in my bag, but this is the only one that has gone disgusting and warped. But, I mean, really, I should just buy a new set so that it's all pretty and the same cover and stuff, but I don't wanna. I like this one.
Don't. I love my lovely matching hardcovers, but I also understand the nostalgia having the originals too. So I think that whatever works for you, you do. Not like I reread them like a couple of times a year anymore either. So, all right,
Well,
let's move on. Sorry, was there something, Naomi?
no, I was just going to say I looked at the new covers, the one that Korean has, and I was like, I don't want those ones. They're not as cool looking. Yeah, those ones. I was looking at them in the bookstore, and I'm like, they're just not as nice as the old covers. Like, they're not as fun to look at, and they don't look as... Yeah, okay. I understand why you did it. I'm just saying it's not as fun to look at. Like, these are all really nice to look at on your shelf. They're all nice and colored, and I know they don't match, but they match. You know what I mean? That's all.
I didn't mind the adult ones that they came out with, though. I thought they were quite nice.
Yeah.
Black covered ones, yeah.
Although a little bit Twilight-y feeling, but anyway.
Well, when
they came out before Twilight.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they came out long before Twilight did.
It doesn't matter though. Twilight has taken over the cover styling of that as being yeah. That's the reference
And then
point now.
every other paranormal romance series had that type of cover.
Exactly.
Yeah, there was like 4 or 5 other series that had that similar cover that sort of just appeared not long after Twilight had the movie come out.
Exactly. Apparently it's smart publishing, but anyway. All right, guys, let's move on. I've actually just sort of written like a whole heap of notes and questions. Does anybody have anything they want to raise? We'll start with the first one. Oh. Sorry, go.
Okay, I was going to say, if we're putting things on the agenda, wanting to talk about, because I thought this was really interesting, because I'm a big fan of the films as well, the differences and similarities and how others felt about how the films perhaps took their own versions, or where, you know, and I guess I'm just looking to see what other people thought about that. That might be a bit further down the track, but I'd love to talk about that at some point in the conversation.
Okay. So I would suggest we don't need to stick hardline one book then the next book sort of thing, but it kind of gives us a sort of a guideline of progression. And so we can do each film as we go, if you like, Sarah.
Whatever suits everybody else. And I understand we're probably going to jump around because I think Karina put up a really interesting post. Maybe it was on Instagram, Karina, where you kind of you highlighted something. Maybe it was in the first book of like the
do you mean my Goodreads review of Chamber of Secrets?
No, I don't know. I think it was just like dropping, like the hints being dropped in the future, or things that you know once you've done the series, and like reading, like knowing what you're looking at and backward in time, and that's what I kind of felt. Yeah, it was one of those things. I think we're going to do a little bit of that tonight too.
Yeah,
of going.
Which is why I was sort of worried about.
Yeah.
That's why I was worried about the spoilers aspect if Vanessa was here, because I know we're going to jump around, we're going to spoil things, and it's going to be hard.
Oh,
so fair warning.
We had some people who hadn't read things. Oh no, we're going to be...
Yeah, so fair warning to anybody watching, no promises about spoilers in here. Yeah. Although obviously our goal is to talk about these 3 books, the chances are pretty high we will say something that will split something up, so yeah. All right then, so I'm going to raise my first point then, which is one thing I think about the first book is that it could be a creative writing lesson on how to show and not tell a story. I was just rereading it, and especially like the first quarter to a third of the book where you're just getting introduced to the wizarding world and everything. I was just like, this is how you introduce someone to a new world. You don't tell them all of this stuff and get them completely bored, which sometimes lately when we've been reading vaginal fantasy books is exactly how I feel. But this one sort of has that guide, you know, obviously a new person being introduced to the world, and the way she shows you the world is not, oh, and you need to know this because later I might reference it. It's we're exploring the world with Harry, and as he sees things, you learn about things.
I think that's the benefit of having a character who also isn't familiar with the world, though. Like, you can't just bombard Harry with all of this new information because he doesn't know anything about any of this as well. So that's sort of the benefit of seeing everything, even though it's told in third person, seeing everything from his perspective.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's still a writer's choice to tell the story through a character like that, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. I mean, I actually, one of my favourite scenes, and I remember showing it in film school, is there's a scene from Real Genius, which is an older film with Val Kilmer in it. I don't know if anybody knows it. I'm showing my age again. But the scene is basically, it's told from the eyes of a freshman who happens to be, it's basically set at, oh crap, I can't remember the name of the college, but it's the California, Caltech. It's at Caltech. So it's got all these geniuses, and it's sort of set, there's this great scene where the freshman who's like 16 is into the dormitory, and he's kind of thrown into this dorm world of geniuses who also are like, you know, first, second, and third years at uni. And it's exactly to your point, Mel, is that you don't know anything about this world, and you're experiencing that world through his eyes. So everything's kind of slowly given to you. But yeah, to Karina's point, I think it was that decision to kind of introduce you to this world through a freshman, so that there's no hang-ups. So I think it's a really good way of not overwhelming people with too much information, and also kind of giving people a open mind towards it.
Yeah, and I think that, like, the fact that the way we experience the world in this doesn't necessarily show us everything about the world. It just shows us what Harry needs to know. I think that's a really good example of the fact that J.K. Rowling doesn't feel the need to explain everything to you that you need to know about this world. She doesn't answer every single question. She just gives you what Harry needs to know, and she knows that later on she's going to tell you about that thing when it happens. I think I'm very hypercritical at the moment of the way people introduce their worlds, so I was just like, oh, that's right, this is done right.
That's interesting.
Anybody have anything else?
Sorry. I was going to say, it's interesting because say we got the point of, say if the story was told from the point of view of, like, Hermione, who is still new to the Wizarding world, but she's so, like, into trying to read all the books or, you know, learn everything she possibly can. The story that we would have gotten and the information that would have been bombarded to us at the very start of the story when Hermione was going through all these books and trying to get all this information would have been a lot more in-depth and would have told a different kind of story, just in the way of what the magic and what the world was that we were sort of entering into. Whereas because Harry was sort of more wide-eyed and, wow, this is all really super exciting and what does this do, like, less about how does everything work and more of, like, just an overall I want to see things. Like,
I think Harry has that sense of wonder. Yeah. That's what you think.
I mean, yeah. Like, she could have told it from, like, the story from any number of sort of first years, and we would have gotten a completely different story, not just because of Harry being the boy who lived, but how they know magic and how they're introduced to magic. Like, if the main character was one of the Half-Bloods where one of his parents was a witch or wizard, like, the world we would have been given would have been completely different. Like, the way we would have been explained to it. And, like, the information they would have known coming into it.
He's kind of the everyman, as it were. Like, he's not exceptional in the way that Hermione is, but he's also not a bumbling along like Neville does. You know, so he's kind of like, well, excuse me for coughing. Other than his history, which he knows nothing about. He shows some talent here, but he's in trouble here. He's like, I suppose, any other person's experience is like, well, I'm going to be good at some things and crap at others, you know, which is nice. Whereas I suppose with Hermione, it's harder to, from an every man point of view, to necessarily understand why she's approaching it from that angle. The other thing I think is interesting when I read this is how much with the Dursleys, right? That is such a children's thing, the way they treat him and everything going on there. You know,
it's almost like Roald Dahl Twits-ish level, the way they treat him.
Yeah, that's a great way of describing it, and that's in a way that by the time, and it's interesting having read all of them and seen all the movies, coming back and you're just going, it does read childish in a way that the rest of the world starts growing and maturing. That doesn't quite add up to me, but of course it's in a children's setting. So it also, I guess those are the bits that I would hurry through reading the books, and in the movies I was really glad that they got them out of the way really quickly, because I don't want to hang around the Dursleys any longer than anything else, you know.
That's, I think, the most frustrating about the first book for me is how long you're with the Dursleys. You're like, move on, please. Oh my God,
we leave. I've forgotten about that.
Speaking of the Dursleys, I had a question that I wrote down. Do you think the Dursleys would be different about magic if it turned out that Dudley was a magician, was a wizard?
Yes.
Maybe.
So
He's such a wonderful little wizard.
Yeah. Liv summed it up pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was like,
I don't know.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Karina, you go.
I don't know, because the reason that Petunia is so anti-magic to begin with is because A, she was left out as a child, and even if she wasn't left out as a child and she had, you know, come to terms with what her sister was, her sister died at the hands of this. And not just like accidentally died at the hands of someone pretty brutal. I don't know that she would have wanted her child to be a part of that, even if she was okay with magic.
But she was also very, I mean, remembering she was jealous that she didn't get to do it. That was a real key epiphany for me, which made a lot more sense because I could never understand why. And it was, you know, there was a jealousy aspect to that. But it's a really good point. But then your point, Karina, is really good. It's like her sister died at the hands of this. It's pretty, you know, but then why treat Harry such like an outsider instead of keeping him safe and making, you know, like, you know, I guess this is a parenting instinct, but I kind of go, if you really want to protect a child from something you think is dreadful as part of your family, then treating them as an outsider is only going to drive them away. So
that comes back into something that we find out in, I think, the 6th, maybe 7th book, when we have some interactions around that specifically and her choices around Harry. So we might want to leave that side of the discussion too.
Yeah, I can't quite remember those, so let's leave that. As far as, I think that she loves Dudley in a way that's, you know, not healthy because she doesn't question him. So perhaps if he had shown talent, or that's not really the right word, talent, it's more like predispositions towards it, it might have been maybe hard for her to handle. She seemed a lot quieter about the whole thing than Vernon was. Vernon was very vocal about how much he hated it, which became, I'd forgotten about the bit, basically the interaction that he'd had with James, which was also a really great cue about how much of a shit James could be. Did anyone else read that and go, oh yeah, he could be a real dick sometimes? It was really hinted at there, yeah.
I think that he probably was put off already by Petunia and how she was talking about things, and then add in bad interactions and attitudes and the fact that it's not choices that fit within my parameters of what is success. It's And the one thing I'm never quite sure of is how much he feels this way because of his protective instincts towards Petunia, because I'm never quite sure if they actually like each other or if they've just got a mutual agreement to head in this particular direction.
Good point.
Yeah.
I always just got the feeling that the way they were so against magic was the same way like some very deep racist people are against like black people or Muslims or whatever. Like I got that feeling of they hate them so much that nothing can sort of change that for them, especially in the beginning. Like, I know they do change as the story evolves because that's what people do, but that's the kind of sort of feeling that I get from them in the beginning. So, I mean, maybe they would have been more receptive if Dudley had shown signs of magic, but I feel like, especially in the beginning, before they sort of started sort of more understanding what was going on, maybe not. Like, maybe Dudley would have been on the outs with Harry.
I also kind of wonder if Dudley wasn't an only child. Like, what are the reasons they're an only child? Could she not have other children? Did they choose not to have other children?
I think
she dotes on him so very much.
Got lumped with another kid. They got lumped with another kid. I mean, that, you know, who they have to support. Like, they're at the same age. They were looking after one child. I mean, I'm just reading into it, but I mean, you know, really, they had one child who was just over a year. Then they got lumped with another child who was around about the same age. That's some serious children to take care of. I still don't think it adds up the way they treated them like such shit, because if you're lumped with a child from the age of 1, you know, as much as you could try and help hold them on the outside, I you know. It's to that point. It's definitely written as a children's tale. Like Mel, you summed it up beautifully in a way that I couldn't think. It's that Roald Dahl type situation that would never happen in reality, but it's told as a, you know, a cautionary tale.
Yeah. Well, that actually leads to one of my other questions was, did Dumbledore actually make the right decision, leaving him with the Dursleys? We know that there's answers for that later on.
I have thoughts about that, except the book didn't answer them. Because I was sitting there going, why aren't they leaving her with like Mrs. Fig down the road? And then they talked about her like within like the first couple of chapters, and that she was obsessed with a cat because she's like a what do you call a person of a non-magical
Squib.
A squib, yeah, she's a squib, and it's like she would understand the whole situation a lot better. But yeah, so I don't know. I see, because Dumbledore's all seeing, all knowing, but is this really like the right way to grow the boy? I don't know. Like Minerva warned him and said these are the worst kind of people. Like, should he stay here?
Well, I know on one hand why Dumbledore made the choice. Like, again, later on we find that out. But regardless, based on what we know in these circumstances, I'm like, almost any wizarding family would have taken him in and raised him in a happy environment. But then Dumbledore made a point at the beginning about the fact that do you want him growing up in that world with the big head he could possibly get in that environment?
Yeah, and that's why I thought a squib like Mrs. Fig, or so someone who knows about the world, so wouldn't have been surprised by it. But is living in a Muggle world with with touch points in the magic world would have been a much better choice. That's to my mind. Like, and I did remember thinking, why didn't they leave him with Mrs. Fig? But then read because she was the crazy cat lady. But hey, I identify with that, so that's that's my thing. So yeah, and he she had her own thing going on, but I don't know. I guess it's just. You'll think it's the Roald Dahl thing, I suppose. It makes for a more interesting story if you've got some people you hate and you understand why so desperately he wants to get away from it.
I think Dumbledore also made the mistake of assuming the best of people because he did write them a letter explaining everything and expecting Harry to be told about everything. And then Hagrid turns up and goes, hang on, you told him he died in a car crash? What is going on here? Why doesn't he know anything about anything?
That's a good point.
So I really think Dumbledore just sort of went, oh yeah, how bad can people possibly be?
That's a fair point.
That's
I think
they turn out to be the worst.
Yeah.
People can be the worst. The absolute worst.
I think the other thing, it's very much a narrative choice by J.K. Rowling because there's nothing like someone, like a character who is totally put upon, that is in totally the worst position for a tween to feel completely like, yes, that's exactly my circumstances.
Yeah.
And feel kinship with Harry.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right.
Who dropped out? Liv dropped out. I'll be back in a sec. I'm going to get a drink. Carry on.
Okay. I don't think I have any more notes about the Dursleys or Dumbledore's choice. Does anybody have anything else they want to raise?
Just that Harry wouldn't be the person he is if he wasn't, even if the Dursleys raised him, like, if they loved him even a little bit, he wouldn't be the same person that he is because he turned out to be the resilient person that he is because of the way that he was treated for 11 years. Like, he wouldn't be, like, he wouldn't have been able to survive book 4? The Triwizard Tournament with everyone making fun of him and even Ron turning away from him. Like, he would not have been able to survive those sorts of things if he hadn't have lived 11 years of, like, his own family, the people who are supposed to love you and take care of you, being absolute jerks to you. You know what I mean?
That's fair point. He spent the first 11 years basically with Dudley forcing nobody to be friends with him. So,
like, he would not be able to survive and, like, mentally survive, I mean. The things that he survived through a bunch of the books, if it hadn't have been for those first 11 years where basically he was not loved at all. And he was basically in a place where he was not expecting to be loved. So when he got people who actually cared for him and were friends with him, he was thankful for that rather than being like, yeah, of course you're my friend. Like, people are friends with people. That's the way the world works.
Yeah. It does also set up the second book where when his friends don't write, he has this strange almost acceptance of that circumstance. So
Yeah, whereas most people would be like, why didn't you write to me? Like, what's going on? What's the deal? Like, he was just very, yeah, that's the way of the world.
yeah.
And I can hear myself.
We can hear you twice.
Oh, I couldn't. That's interesting.
Yeah,
I can.
I could hear an echo. I can still hear an echo.
All right.
Yes, that's my 2 cents.
Cool. No, 2 cents is good. So one of the other things that the podcast raised, which I thought was interesting, is the inappropriates of some of the tropes that J.K. Rowling uses for describing characters, especially in the early stages.
Are you talking about some body shaming stuff?
Yeah, body shaming, exactly. Was a big one. There's also
very much. Yeah.
Like anybody who is bad or awful is fat, and if they're a nice person and they're fat, they're not described as fat. They're plump, and jovially plump and things along those lines. And they're certainly not grotesquely fat the way Dudley gets described and things like that. So
Piggy, I think, was another word that I remember seeing for Dudley. But I also felt Neville came under that a little bit too, which I felt was really disparaging. Like, especially because we know Neville later, right? So we know exactly why he's in Gryffindor. And that was one of the questions that I had, which I'll come back to. But yeah, I certainly noticed that, Mel, a lot more than I think I did when I was younger, because I think, again, it's something that's been an unconscious thing in people's minds, and now that people have brought it to, have raised it, it's become something I'm now very conscious of. And,
I also think it got to do with when it was published.
Yeah, because it was published in 1997. She was rejected by 12 other publishers before that, so presumably it was written like 1995, 1996. That's, 20 years ago.
Oh, wow. Thanks for making me feel old there. That's great.
Hey, me too.
Me too. And I would like to say, I was in my 20s when I read these. I was in my 20s.
Yes, thank you. I was at uni studying to be a teacher when these books were coming out. Nobody's allowed to say anything.
I was
being old. So I think that because like the whole body shaming thing's really been only the last 10 years.
Even like hugely the last 5.
Yeah, like not so much like 10 years ago. Like it was still fairly common for someone to say, that girl's fat or whatever, and no one to say anything.
Yeah. So, yeah. But what I didn't think was a new thing was the fact that she does use stereotypes of cultures to describe characters. So, for example, the goblins, clearly meant to be Jewish.
Yeah, I can see that now. I never picked up on it, but yeah, I can see it now.
The reclusive factor, the smarts, the money, the shrewd, that sort of stuff, all of those sorts of things.
But saying that, aren't goblins in mythology very shrewd with treasures anyway?
Yeah, I thought so. I always thought that part of their mythology was that they were very shrewd and they never wanted to share their treasures and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of where I was going with it. Because I don't think there's a goblin I'd ever met in a fairy tale or a piece of work that wasn't kind of that way.
Sorry, guys, I just noticed there's a message from Liv on Facebook. She had to bow out. She's got bad internet tonight.
We miss you, Liv.
Okay.
It's not fun. But hey, I'm not getting kicked out, so I'm happy. Yeah.
Now you've said it.
Yeah.
No,
you said it.
I will come down on you. Oh, excuse me, sorry.
There we go. Found some wood. Okay.
Mel, I totally noticed that, and I noticed some of the tropes. Some of them are good though, like Hagrid is written as being someone who's from the West Country. His language is written that way. But what you can also say on that note is that he's written as being a bit simple, which is also a trope of people from the West Country as being written as being simple.
True.
So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely playing to some of those type of things, which isn't great. I mean, take the Weasleys. They're written as a typical Irish Catholic family. That's what they're written as. They're all redhead. There's a billion of them. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot of influences coming into this. And there's also maybe my own bias, my own biases or biases in others have been uncovered in the last few years because of the work I've done, that I started to notice some of these things. So, yeah.
To give her credit, though, I do know that later on she starts to fight back against some of the tropes that she's almost established. So, yeah, I want to give her credit in that respect. But at the same time, yeah, that could be problematic in some respects. But good conversations with kids, so.
But it's also, if you think of it from another point of view, which is where I get passionate about it, is if you're playing to tropes to children at that age, then you're actually setting expectations and biases in their heads at that point, which is not, is actually when you want to break them. So I'm actually feel like arguing the other way and saying, really, that's exactly when you need to challenge them. That's exactly when you need to kind of say, no, this is not, restricted or not, shouldn't be a trope or an expectation that this person is this way because of the culture that they've come from or the colour of their skin or the way that they talk. Like, you should never assume that about someone. So in some ways I actually would call bullshit to that. Not to you, but to that. So maybe she did just become aware of it as she got older. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, that's what I mean by it's a conversation to have with kids, in that it's not that I would want them not to read the books, but that I would want to have a conversation with them about these tropes and how they exist and what they...
This got me thinking so much about Huckleberry Finn, actually, when I was reading these books. I really got thinking about Huckleberry Finn, and I was thinking, would I want Luna to read that? How do I feel about Luna reading that? Because there's bits of that book I love, but there are parts I absolutely detest and hate, and I really hate how Jim is portrayed because it is such a trope. And it is just, it really makes me angry. And the end of that book is what really gets me. The way he is treated by Tom Sawyer, and just that, I just felt like just smacking Mark Twain upside the head with that whole ending. But there are parts I love, the friendship and the floating down the river, but it's one of those things of, is it a point of saying, when do you, because I didn't read that book till later in life, so the same type of thing is like, when is it setting expectations and tropes, and when do you have that conversation with a child around that and saying, well, how do you have that conversation? I don't know. I mean, these are things that you need to discover. But it's interesting you raised that, because it got me thinking about other books in that way. And Huckleberry Finn sprung to mind.
Probably we could go for a very deep dive into, how you actually deal with these with kids. So I'll talk to you later. I could spend about an hour on that topic alone and never mention Harry Potter again. So let's not go there. All right. Questions. Oh. Was anybody else surprised, as I was, that or had forgotten how long it took before Hermione actually became a main character?
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. I thought it was a lot earlier in the book than it actually was, and then she suddenly came up, and I'm like, oh, I'm like 2/3 through the book, and Hermione is finally becoming an actual character in the main character in the book. Didn't realize it took this long. Oh well, whoops.
Yeah. No, I was the same, and I think part of it is because I know the books, I know the movies. Like, I watch them every Christmas, so they set that up as a thing right from the beginning. Like, even though she hasn't become their friend yet, she's in there present. So yeah, I was kind of like going, oh well, they're not friends yet. That's really strange. This is taking forever.
It's like, where is she? What's going on?
Even if she'd been there, but not as one of their friends, like if she'd been there more, but not as their finally established friendship, I probably would have been, yeah, okay. But no, she's just not even there that much, apart from every now and then to nag Ron.
I suppose we're really only seeing the book from Harry's perspective. Like it's not like it's in the movies where we sort of see the surrounds, even the stuff he's not looking at. The book is more exactly what he's seeing. So if he's in class and she's on the other side of the room, to him she's not here because she's not in his world. So I suppose that's why she appears more in the movie than in the book, because in the movie we sort of see the classroom, so we can see both of them, whereas in the book it's just Harry is talking to Ron or sitting beside him and reading the book or writing or whatever. Like,
and that's an interesting to talk about the movies. That was an interesting creative decision that Chris Columbus took. Is that it's and I've forgotten this. It says quite clearly in the book, when McGonagall meets everybody the first years at the steps, and she says, you're about to be sorted into your houses, and she explains about the houses. And one thing she says in the book that isn't said in the movie, and there's a creative reason for it, she said you will have your lessons with your houses, whereas in the movie all the houses the first years are together. The class is smaller and they all just so you have Slytherins, Ravenclaws, Hufflepuffs, and Gryffindors all together in the class, because to exactly what Naomi's saying, you get to see Malfoy's reaction. You get to see, Lavender's. I think she's a Gryffindor anyway, but Pavati or some of the so you see all the other the year interacting and what they think. So that is totally true, and I was really aware of it. I was like, oh wow, yeah. And they say, oh, we've got this lesson with the Hufflepuffs and this lesson with the Slytherins. Whereas when you watch the movies, they've always got lessons with the Slytherins. They're always in the same lesson. So
yeah,
actually, that leads into one of my points that I had written down, which was there's not enough teachers at this school.
But there's all sorts of mathematical problems. Like if you think about it. When you see the scenes of them all in the Great Hall, there's like 800 kids there, yeah? But if you think about it, there's 5 Gryffindor girls and 5 Gryffindor boys in first year, which means 10 kids per grade level, times 7 for the number of levels, so that's 70 kids in Gryffindor, times 4 makes it what?
That was explained.
It just doesn't,
That was explained. J.K. Rowling explained that where Harry's year is a lot smaller because of the First War, whereas like the 7th years, when Harry is in first year, would be a lot larger because it was before the war started. Like his year,
but that makes it worse because then there are even fewer teachers.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying that it's a good thing, but numbers-wise, for the amount of sort of kids you see in the Great Hall, the reason that it looks like there are so many and there's so few in Harry's year is because of the exponential
that's fair, but then you have this issue with there's like 5 teachers.
Like if you think about it, right? Let's just your main teachers, and then you've got your electives that they do in the 3rd year. But let's just it's really mostly the main classes. Even if each class is with at least one other group of the similar year level, so you've got potions with the Slytherins, yeah, exactly. You've got 2 classes, so you've got 2 groups from 2 different houses at the same time. Even with that, if you do the breakdown of how many lessons are running, there's not enough teachers there to run that many lessons.
Yeah, because that would be 14 per house.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just figured they must have lots of study breaks, like study hours. What do you call them?
But
you know what I mean.
Very specifically don't have that, and you get introduced to the concept of it in their 6th year.
Yeah.
I mean,
the other thing is there's lots of ones we never meet. We never meet the teachers. So like
no, because Hermione takes every subject in 3rd year. Hermione takes everything.
But we never meet the ruins teacher. We never meet the Aromathacy teacher. So I don't know who's taking those.
Bunch of teachers we never actually meet. Yeah, but there are a bunch of teachers we don't actually meet because we only see stuff through Harry's eyes, and we only see
he doesn't do
runes. Yeah, he doesn't do runes.
But they are electives. In the end, the main classes that they're taking, so that they all compulsorily have to take. You've got charms, you've got whatever McGonagall teaches, transfiguration, potion, history,
Defense of the Dark Arts.
Herbology.
Defense of the Dark
Herbology.
Arts, and you've got herbology. 6 classes. Only one teacher for each of those subjects is supposed
And
to somehow
LDUH.
teach all of the year groups. They never mention having an actual Madam Hooch class except for in the first year one time.
Yeah.
But past 3rd year, you don't have to do all those classes. Like, once you get to 4th year, you don't have to do Transfiguration. If you don't get an O or better.
Yeah, but that's after the 5th year. Only 6 years
the
get...
3rd year?
No, it's the 5th year.
They just get to pick 2 extras
Yeah.
in 3rd year.
So they get to choose all their
I'm
classes.
just
They've still
blurring my
got
books.
because Harry if they could have dropped potions, they would have, but they had to keep it.
Yeah. And so they're obviously doing a little bit of extra on some of those baseline subjects in the first 2 years, and then in the 3rd year they have to do, they do an elective, and so they do a little bit less of those baseline subjects. Sorry, I've got
Long
punch
story
problems.
short, they need more teachers.
Anyway, look, the thing
they
is
don't.
that it doesn't matter. It's a fictional world and all of that jazz.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that...
This
as
is the
a
one that has a
teacher,
time turner. It has time turners. Maybe that's all how all of the
I was just about to say, is that how all of the teachers
I
work?
thought
Like,
teaching
all
was
of the teachers have time turners? They just
thought
give
teaching
one to Hermione like it's no big deal.
when you only had to do one day worth. But if you had to teach the same day twice, teaching just got a whole heap harder.
Yeah.
Maybe they have
back in
Primer. We know you have to do the time again. We've done primer. Yeah, she's getting dogs. Oh.
Maybe they just have their curriculum like really, really refined.
I honestly just had it in my head that the only reason that Harry and Ron kept doing potions was because that they wanted to be auras and you needed potions for that.
That's
so
in
wanted-
6th year.
Yeah, they wanted to drop. If they could have dropped, because they hated Snape and he, wasn't great towards them. Because
What
I
you're
remember him
thinking of,
talking-
Naomi, happens in 6th year. So they wanted to drop potions, and I think Ron didn't even get a sufficient owl to do potions, and then Slughorn took for potions.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I did not finish book 3 this time round. Like, I'm
No,
about
I haven't finished either. I'm on that
through because I haven't had a chance to finish it, and I'm obviously just blurring my books together because it's been a while since I've done a proper reread.
Yeah.
So my apologies. I thought the only reason they had kept it was because they had to do it for Auroras, not because they had to do it. That makes sense.
Yeah. Can we talk about the Defense of the Dark Arts role position? Okay, so this is like, as we've said, like role was harder to fill than African prime minister in this country. We seem to go through as many teachers as we do prime ministers. So, okay, Quirrell. I got the sense with Quirrell, he'd actually been a while, but happened to go on holiday and got chatting to the Dark Lord and ended up with him in his head, but apparently had been probably not a bad teacher before that. Is that how others had read the Quirrell situation?
See, I have to wonder about that because the Defense Against Dark Arts position is cursed, so that the teacher only holds it for 1 year. So was Quirrell there before that?
Well, that was my plot hole.
Yeah, he was definitely the sense he was. It's a plot hole.
Yeah.
So no, okay. Can someone? So sorry, Karina, you were saying it's cursed. So was it actually cursed?
Yeah.
Or is that just? I don't remember that. What was that from?
It's in a later book. Let's not go too deep.
Is it in
Wait.
6.
Is
6 or
the
7?
book connected? Book is the curse connected to Harry? Like that would be why Quirrell had been there for a while. That was the sense I got. Same.
Because okay. Now my second question is.
No. It's very different because it was Voldemort did it before Harry was born.
Right.
No, but what I mean is that the curse could be attached to Harry as well, because at that stage,
So,
Harry has part of Voldemort. That's all I meant.
so it never came.
It
The curse
wasn't-
didn't kick in until he started school, kind of thing.
Yeah, the curse is not linked to Harry at all. The curse is linked to Voldemort's desire to have the role of Defense Against Dark Arts teacher.
Apparently, Quirrell taught Muggle studies the year prior.
Oh, okay.
He took Muggle studies. Okay.
Ah,
Right.
that was
my impression. He taught
So-
Defense Against the Dark Arts. That's why I was like, well, then how did he teach Defense Against the Dark Arts if there's a curse? Like,
No,
maybe
he only
it's
taught
linked
it for
to-
1
And-
year.
Does that explain why Snape wanted the role but never got offered it or took it? You know, because as
Was
much
that
as he
from the
made,
book?
I know. I'm just asking quick.
No, I'm asking Karina.
No, I found it on the wiki.
Yeah, I'm going to
I
guess
found it
that's
on the
part of...
wiki, which assumes that Joe has added it to Pottermore.
Because I'm going to say that was definitely not spelled out in the book.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't
Obvious.
supposed to
No, I completely agree.
I was like, no, that
I'm
wasn't in
kind
the book. Yeah, I wouldn't have missed that.
I'm kind of on a Witch Please's side on this, in that unless it's in the books, I don't care. Because everything else is Joe either trying to fix up mistakes that she made or change things, and that's really frustrating. Don't even get me started on Hermione and Ron. But anyway,
Yeah.
we'll get there.
We'll get there. And
anything else
okay,
from-
so Gilderoy Lockhart.
Yes.
Now,
I'm
my
moving us on
question
to
is... Oh, yeah. I'll come back to it, but I'm just talking about this particular role.
Yeah.
Because he is terrible, and everybody in the teaching, you know, and the staff knows he's terrible. That's it's a key part. You know, like nobody's fooled by his dickheaded, you know, ness.
Yeah.
How does he get this role? Is it because the board, you know, there's a board? Do we think the board employed him as opposed to Dumbledore? Because Dumbledore, like, why is Dumbledore putting someone who's actually dangerous?
Because he's been filling the role for years, having to get a new replacement every year. He's desperate at this point.
Right. But then he gets
Lockhart
Lupin.
was the only one who would take the job.
Right. I don't know. Okay. But he's dangerous. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah.
But then isn't somebody not properly teaching it dangerous too? So Quirrell's just as bad by not teaching it well.
Yeah.
Like, Dumbledore put a giant two-headed dog in the castle, and, you know...
No. Three-headed dog.
Three-headed, I'm sorry. To put a three-headed dog in the castle, and then for detention sent children into the Forbidden Forest, where it is forbidden to go. Like,
That's true.
The mirror that drives people insane with their desires. Who puts that mirror in the middle of a classroom?
it's an unused classroom, okay? I don't know why the kids would have found it. What are you doing going into a classroom? It's unused.
You know what I thought it was?
I'm sorry, were you never 17 in school?
It's the room requirement, though. That's what I understood it when I reread this. I went, that's the room requirement because he needed somewhere to hide.
Possible. But look, the thing is that
Because
I love
he's easy to get.
Dumbledore. He's a terrible principal. Terrible. Not only is he terrible, but more than half the teachers at this school are terrible teachers. It's not just the Defense Against the Dark Arts role. There's a lot of them are terrible. Don't get me started on the lack of differentiation of the learning. Neville? Sorry.
No, that's okay. I don't, you know.
Plastic bag behind me.
Sorry, the Oh Witch Please podcast has me thinking about the pedagogy of the school and how the teachers work, and the fact that they haven't even mentioned it, but I'm like, oh my God, poor Neville's in this classroom. He's clearly not doing well, and nobody ever tries to no teacher, single one every time, actually tries to help him outside of Lupin in the third book, but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
I get the feeling
and Sprout.
Sprout, I feel like sort of took him under her wing and sort of tried to flourish that love of herbology in him.
And you know what's weird? I know I haven't read this book yet, but freaking Barty Crouch, it's Barty Crouch Jr., right? who plays yeah, he's actually even if he's disguised, he's actually a really great teacher. I always remember thinking that. I'm going, he's out to get Harry, but he turned out to be a fucking fantastic teacher.
Except for the fact that he's doing unforgivable curses on the kids. But
yeah, teach them something. Like, that's the thing. He's like, they learn.
To be fair, he, on a scale of worst teachers that have taken that job that we have seen, like as Harry, he is not the worst.
He's like,
it's a pretty low bar that he has to step over, but he's definitely not the worst.
And then Crouch as far as the best teachers in that role.
But see, now this gets me down to Snape in terms of him as a bad teacher, because we get this sort of, impression that he's a bad teacher. So we get these books from Harry's perspective, almost entirely. Is Snape actually a bad teacher, or is he a bad teacher because Harry doesn't like him and doesn't trust him? And so his perspective is that he's bad.
He doesn't like Harry either. Like, I don't
feel
like
he
starts it. He
But
starts
he's pretty
like
nasty
Harry.
for lots of people.
Oh, he's pretty nasty to everybody, it's true. And I mean, one of my questions would have been to him, like, okay, spoilers, but I would have said, as much as if Harry is like, as much as I'm James' son, I'm also Lily's. Could you remember that fucking part about it?
Yeah, but that would be like the
James.
It's supposed to be this always thing. It's like always until you can only see my father in me. What?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm like, so it's like, well, half, or is it because she gave his life that he's like, I don't know, but I just
I think it just sort of serves as a reminder that not only did Lily marry someone else, she had a child with someone else and then sacrificed herself for said child.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Because in the end, he's doing it for Lily, but in the end, Lily's not there anymore, and that's who he really wants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose. Yeah.
Wow, we really went into the future of the books there.
That's true. Okay. Can we roll it back to...
the answer to that question is yes and no. Yes, he's a bad teacher, but no, he's also somewhat of a good teacher in the right circumstance. Like, I feel like with the right people that he doesn't hate, and I feel like as a broad thing, because Harry is in Gryffindor, he hates all Gryffindors because of that. If Harry was in Hufflepuff, he would hate all Hufflepuffs. If he was in Ravenclaw, he would hate all Ravenclaws. I think Slytherin is another idea, but I still feel like he would have hated Harry no matter what. But I feel like the whole house gets umbrellaed because of Harry.
Yeah, poor Neville.
See, I
He
wonder
really
if that's-
gets it.
I wonder if that's true, though, because all of the classes that we see Harry in with Snape is with the Slytherins. We don't know how Snape treats other people from other houses.
That's true.
But we only see Snape from Harry's perspective, which is when he's looming over him and yelling at him, and like we don't really get to experience him, which is why I'm saying yes and no. Like, there is the chance that he could have been a good teacher in the right circumstance, because I feel like he had the right idea of what he was trying to get across to students. He at least sort of was trying to be a good teacher, whereas some people were just useless.
Even Hagrid sort of says to him, why would you suspect Snape? Snape's a fine, he's a fine teacher or whatever. Hagrid's very dismissive of Harry's dislike of Snape, like Harry doesn't actually have a legitimate reason to suspect or dislike Snape, and that sort of makes me think that this is just Harry's issue.
I think so. Or at least a good part of it is Harry's issue, just as much as Snape.
I think it gets
not
reflected on Hermione, because, he asks the question, she can answer it, and he won't go to her, and poor Neville cops it. So I think anybody who's kind of connected to Harry, like as a friend or close friend, gets kind of copped with that a little bit.
I would question the Neville at this stage. Harry and Neville are not friends at this stage, as is evidenced by the third book.
Yeah. In fact, actually, we'll get there. I want to talk about, when we get to the third book, the four older friends versus the 4 that I think like there's some mirroring that I think is really interesting. Yeah.
Okay, let's do the second book because we haven't done
Oh, quick
much
question.
from
I
it.
just wanted to point something out before we move on. When I was reading through this, and I was this is the first book, and I was reading about all the different things that Harry's coming across as far as ingredients and this and that, and basic potion ingredients he had to get. So there's one bit where he's a Diagon Alley and he's got to get, it says dragon liver, 16 sickles an ounce, they're mad, soft hooning came from the dark sign. But then there was this bit that says basic potion ingredients for Harry. Harry himself examined silver unicorn horns at 21 gallons each. Aren't unicorns and like unicorn hairs and things, it's like these unicorns apparently later on are supposed to be these creatures that you don't kill, and and I'm going, how are they getting these unicorn horns, and why are there so many of them? So I'm like,
Maybe they're dying naturally.
Yeah, maybe it's like one of those elephant things.
Well, that would be why it's 21 gallons thing. Like, that's pretty expensive. But I mean, for that kind of price, how does someone like Ron's family, who doesn't have a lot of money, afford ingredients like that? Like,
I don't know.
You know what I mean? Like,
I also
saw
know
the
that
math.
they kill a shitload of dragons in this for ingredients. That's the other thing I noticed. Everything was like dragon's blood, dragon's liver, dragon scale, dragon this, and going, like, is this what Charlie is off doing, is basically breeding them for slaughter? I was like, no wonder Harry wants to save them.
Dragons are pretty big.
Yeah, so you can probably get quite a lot out of them, but, I did think that sort of seemed to be this,
no,
I know. Attitude towards it. Heartstrings about dragons, it just went on and on. 12 uses for dragon's blood.
Like, how much heartstring could you get out of one dragon, and how many wands are there out there that have dragon's heartstring? Like, and wands are only like 7 gallons or something, so they're not super expensive in comparison to other things in the world.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's just something I've noticed.
Fair enough.
And then with Neville, that was my final thing, because I've got a soft spot for Neville. I love Neville. When the hat took so long to decide, do you think the hat was thinking about putting him in Hufflepuff?
Oh, for Neville, possibly?
Yeah.
It's the only real other option, isn't it?
That's definitely not a Ravenclaw.
Yeah. No,
he's definitely not
he's not
Ravenclaw.
inquisitive
Slytherin's the young, and I think he'd be mutilated in Slytherin. So
I think it would have to be Hufflepuff, if not Gryffindor.
Yeah, and I wonder if you think about the last book, whether is that, like, if she was alluding, like, if you read, now you know what happens in the last book, whether you kind of think, was that, like, the hat trying to decide whether he would be, would take up the mantle of greatness that he could have, because he was one of the children born in June. Was that the prophecy that we hear later?
Mm-hmm. He and Harry share a birthday.
Yeah. So
he and Harry are both could have been the children of a prophecy, basically.
Yeah.
I think the thing is that I feel sad for Hufflepuff, because it feels like the leftovers group.
It kind of does, but then they got Cedric Diggory. So who else did they have?
Tonks. Badass.
They got me. I got sorted, and I am in Hufflepuff.
Oh, you're a Hufflepuff. You see, I'm a Ravenclaw, so.
Me too.
I'm a Slytherin.
Yay! To be with us. Yay!
But I mean, in the books, especially in the beginning, it's very like, yes, Hufflepuffs are the leftovers, and Slytherin are the evil ones, and Ravenclaw are the book nerds, but like, as you can see, as the books sort of go on, you sort of get the feeling that each house has more than just that one trait, basically.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't think she did a very good job of casting that off of Slytherin, though. Like, we have this point where they actually say, why don't we just chuck all the Slytherins out? And that's repeated throughout the series.
Yeah, there is. But there are also people who follow Voldemort in, like, Ravenclaw.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
I think the thing is too is that a lot of the Slytherin stuff, you've got to remember that we're still seeing it from Harry's perspective. And Harry sees things very black and white. He doesn't see a lot of grey, especially in these early books.
And he's a lot about Malfoy. Is a lot of it, like Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle. It's not a lot about the other Slytherins necessarily, who are doing their own thing, and He
came in biased. He came in biased. He was made biased by Hagrid before he even got to the school.
Yeah.
Then he was made more biased by Ron, like, as they were in the train. Like, his point of view is very biased to, the good are good and the bad are bad, and there is no in between. You are either good or you are bad. And Slytherin is the bad. Raven and Gryffindor is the good, and the other two are just the other two. Like, because that's how Harry sees it, that's how the book is written. And it gets expanded upon as the books go on, but that's obviously how his world is, because that's how he is.
Because every time something happens good to Gryffindor, the other two houses always cheer them on, and you're like, maybe they're just politely clapping, not so much cheering you.
But again, that could just be Harry sort of being like, yay, everyone's cheering for me, when they could just be sitting there going, yay. You know what I mean? Like, it could just be him going, yes.
Or it could, just be the underdog where they've gone, look, Slytherin's won for 6 years running. We're just going to cheer for whoever's the underdog.
The other thing, too, that was suggested is that perhaps Harry is a little bit blind to his own faults, because the story's told from his point of view. We don't get to see that, but we're going to talk about Harry's poor decisions now in Book 2 and the stupid flying car.
Quick question before the quick flying car. Did anyone reading this suddenly go themselves, okay, this was Quirrell meets Hagrid in a pub, gets the secrets of Fluffy out of him in exchange for a dragon egg. And it takes weeks before he goes into, before Harry meets him in the frickin' Chamber of Secrets. So, is it Chamber of Secrets? No. Where are we? In the basement somewhere with the, So, are we, as I said here, like, it's Quirrell just been going in there every night trying to work out how to get past the mirror, and Harry just happened to be in there that night? Or, like, to me, I'm kind of like, he got the secret of how to get past Fluffy, but it took them weeks to kind of
I think he knew about Fluffy because Fluffy's the first thing that's there, and then you have to account for, there's all these other trials before that. Before he even gets to the mirror, he would have had to figure out how to get past Devil's Snare, how to get past McGonagall's, like he would have had to be a chess expert, and all of this other stuff in order to get through. And even the logic puzzle, that may have taken him quite a while to figure out.
Right.
I mean, the other thing
is that would have taken weeks. We just keep going back. Okay.
It says in the book the reason that it's that night is because Dumbledore's not at the school.
Oh, that too.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, because I thought that he could have gotten through, not the Fluffy trap, but the rest of the traps more easily because he was a teacher and he knew what the other teachers were doing. So he could have, he would have known that there was Devil's Snare, so he would have looked up how to get past it, and he would have known how to get past the chess thing because he would have known, okay, I need to do this, 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 so he could have just done it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, thank you, because that bugged me. That makes more sense now. Okay, we can talk about the car.
All right. Tarina, I love that we're all like the flying car. No.
I like the car.
Tarina, come on! I'm giving you open red space. Go.
Oh my God, this car! Like, I know it's a kid's book and it's fictional and all of this stuff, but you don't have a secret platform at a Muggle train station without having protocols for getting all of these children on this single train. There's one train to Hogwarts a year, and there are all 1,800 whatever number of students that have to get on this train. There would be a witch or wizard in Muggle dress on the King's Cross side, making sure that all of the Muggleborns knew how to get onto the platform in the first place. There'd be someone checking off names. There'd be people. There'd be a head count. There'd be double checks. They would be so precise about making sure everyone was on this train. Because if you think about it, when you go to camp, when you're in like year 3, 4, 5, 6, there's teachers making sure that you're on that bus, and if you're not on that bus, they call your mum and they're like, hey, how come she's not here yet? And that was always me. I was that kid who got there like 3 seconds beforehand every year. You know, there would be someone standing there who would go, just a minute, we'll just contact the people on the other side of the platform and we'll figure out what's going on. It wouldn't work out like that.
Yeah.
I find it very frustrating.
Not only that, does anybody else think about the fact that the Hogwarts Express doesn't stop anywhere else on the way? What, everybody lives in London?
Yeah.
I feel like everyone has to travel to London because the Hogwarts Express has to, like, magically get to the place, because if it's going from London, isn't, like, Hogwarts in, like, Scotland?
Yeah, I actually thought it
really
wasn't how
long way.
everybody got there. I thought there was one mode of transportation, actually. But it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm fine with, you know, the wizarding families, they can apparate and do all of their bits and pieces to get there, but what about the Muggle-born families?
Yeah, it's true.
They're coming from all over England to get there.
Yeah, like Seamus is Irish.
Yeah, I thought Hogwarts is in Scotland, which is why it didn't stop anywhere, because it was like a magical thing.
Yeah.
It's a hidden
The other thing
location,
we
so
have
I
to
guess it's
remember,
not
though-
stopping.
Sorry, England's a lot smaller than Australia. Like, the entire UK is a lot smaller than Australia. We just don't sort of have that perspective because we live in this very large country. When my grandparents were in the UK, they said they were driving like 40 minutes somewhere, and everyone asked them if they were staying overnight because it was a 40-minute drive, and they were like, oh, no, it's just a day trip.
Yeah. Saying that, though, I lived in the UK, and actually it is, so the trip from London to Edinburgh is about 6 hours, because I've done that on a non-stop. I went up for
That's
New
still
Year's.
not that far.
It's not that far.
Like
Don't get me wrong,
Australian
it's not that
standards.
far. It's fine. But it is interesting because to me it is just as much effort to get to London. If you were coming from Cardiff in Wales, you wouldn't want to go to London first to go to Scotland. You'd want to go up through, like if you're in Liverpool, like there's no freaking sense going the 4 freaking hours to London to go up to Scotland. You just want to make your own bloody way. You know, like there's a whole lot of places. Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't make any sense, but I mean, again, we're seeing it through Harry's eyes. Maybe it does stop.
Yeah.
Maybe
and
it
also,
does,
I have
yeah.
to say, at that first bit, he, you know, actually McGonagall calls him out and says, you know, it didn't occur to you. I think
Send an owl.
Yeah, you could have sent an owl.
Yeah.
You could have talked to someone. I think it's so true. I think Ron, because I remember being this person when I was a kid. I think they wanted to do what they wanted to do, and it kind of like that was their first kind of thought, and they didn't kind of think anyway around that there could be no more sense. Like, oh, we could fly the car because that would be kick-ass. Like, that's just.
But I had this same frustration throughout the second book, and perhaps it's the sort of the part of the Harry growing up stage, and maybe because of circumstances it didn't happen so much in the third one, but especially in the second one. I think the reason it frustrates me so much is I personally think Harry doesn't trust adults from the second book. He doesn't trust adults to solve his problem. And I think it comes from how he's been raised.
Yeah.
He doesn't trust adults to solve his problems, and so all throughout the second book, whenever there's something going on, he doesn't tell an adult.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
Whenever he does, it's usually McGonagall because he can't reach Dumbledore, and McGonagall's dismissive, so he doesn't trust adults.
Yeah. And in the third freaking book, she takes off with his broomstick.
Mm.
So I don't blame
in
him.
all of his life.
Like,
Sorry, Sarah, you go.
no. I'm just nodding.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, in all of his life, when has he had an opportunity to trust an adult? Like, you know, his aunt and uncle treated him like crap for his whole life. Teachers through all of his grade school before he started at Hogwarts, like, he was tormented by Dudley and Dudley's friends. And did they do anything about it? Yep.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, why would he trust any adult ever? And I feel like
it didn't improve in the first book for him at Hogwarts.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I feel like especially with the way people treat like purebloods and people who know about witches and wizards. He's like, well, if I tell you something and they tell you something, you're just going to believe them because they're real. They've been doing this a lot longer than me, even if I'm telling the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he also makes some pretty big leaps of like.
He does. I'm not saying
that.
I'm not saying it's without error, but he doesn't really have an opportunity to trust an adult because no one gives him that opportunity.
Not without error, constantly with error, I think is what you meant to say.
That is exactly what I meant.
Nearly every book.
But he doesn't have an adult to tell anything to, so he doesn't have anyone to say, maybe if you thought about it like this, it would, he doesn't have anyone to sort of help him see what he's doing is absolutely idiotic.
He does go to Hagrid a lot, though. But Hagrid always says to him, no, you're not being smart, Harry.
Yeah. Hagrid's always protecting his position, too.
Yeah. But I feel like
Hagrid's
Harry
not
treats
an adult.
Yes.
Yeah. And it doesn't help.
He's the older friend.
And it doesn't help you have someone like Percy as the prefect and then eventually the head boy who doesn't make himself a confidant either. So you haven't got any transitional adults to kind of, make themselves. I feel like in a lot of ways in the third book, the first adult he feels he can start having a trusting relationship is with Lupin.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I think that's probably part of it.
Which is, to me, one of the reasons that I get so desperately sad when I'm reading the third book that Lupin doesn't tell him. Like, the one thing Harry is missing the most is knowledge of his parents. That's what he wants the most in his life. That's why in the third book, when he hears his mum talking and his dad talking, he's desperate for it. Because nobody's got any information, nobody shares anything because they're hurt as well. Like, they've got difficulties inside themselves, so they find it difficult to talk about Lily and James. And it's like, Lupin, sorry, I think your responsibility here was actually not just to help Harry with him as a teacher, but also to reach out to Harry as somebody who knew his father and perhaps share some anecdotal stories.
And what's interesting, admittedly, I'm only...
Sorry.
I was going to say that was an interesting point, and admittedly I'm only 70% into the third book now, that it was an interesting thing in some ways of the way of what they've chosen to use in the movie as opposed to what was in the book. And I feel in the movie that the relationship between Lupin and Harry was a lot deeper, and there's a really key scene when Lupin talks about his father, and yes, I knew your father. He was and it really, like, for me, reading this Lupin, is enhanced by the Lupin I saw played on screen. And I know it's just, and in some ways it's like, they're not quite the same story. They're like two reflections of a story being told in different ways, which is actually fine, don't get me wrong, because I think the storytelling in the third one, Alfonso Cuarón's done an amazing job. Even though he's taken liberties, I think they're the right liberties, but I also feel that, to your point about that relationship, that obviously Alfonso Cuarón went, it needs to be kind of set because this guy knows his family. What is he doing? So. Yeah. But I don't know. I haven't read the last 30%, and maybe Luke will be more forthcoming about that.
I'm almost at the start of the last sequence, basically. So into the sequence where everything happens, and up until this point, the most Lupin has done is acknowledge that he knew James. He didn't go any further than acknowledging that, though. He didn't say, I was really good friends with him, I knew Lily, nothing.
I think he had this fear that if he went into the fact that he was friends with James, he would have had to address the fact that he was also friends with Sirius, and Sirius, until, a few, 50 pages before the end of the book, was a mass murderer.
Yeah.
True.
I think he was just sort of worried about acknowledging that.
Yeah, and they dealt with that about that. Yeah. Yeah.
I suppose to me, as the adult in the circumstances, when you can see that there's clearly a child in need, because he's working with Harry on the Patronus spell, charm. He knows that Harry is desperate for anything from his parents, and yet he still doesn't man up, essentially, and go, you know what, I'm going to figure out how to have this conversation without saying too much, because there's a child in need.
Yeah. And again, it's really
really
interesting because there's a period in the movie where, again, they take liberties because in the movie, Lupin doesn't stop Harry facing the boggart first off. They actually do that as a way of introducing the training later. So he does face the boggart, and it does come out being a Dementor, as opposed to in the first one he doesn't even let him. And then they have the same conversation about like why he didn't. He said, I did think it was going to be Voldemort, but and it's really interesting because there's a lot more of what I get the feeling that some of the things that you're talking about, Mel, that's exactly what the creators of the movie who worked on the script and stuff felt themselves. Like, we need to kind of delve into this, because for me what's really interesting in the movie is that when you see Lupin with Severus at the end, the betrayal that Harry feels, that loss of an adult, that you feel that so severely because he's built up this emotion with it, that I'll be really interested to see if that's there with this one. I remember being really shocked, but not horrified in the same way that I remember seeing the film of like, oh my God, this man is just not turned out to be he's another person disappointed him again, but it turns out not to be the case. And there's an interesting part with the boggart part where he's trying to call his Patronus charm, and there's a bit in the movie where Harry's talking about what memory he uses, and he says and for me he says, it's not a memory per se, I can't describe it, but it's the happiest I ever felt. And for me at that point I went, he's referring to the time he saw his parents in the mirror. And that's not what's in the book. And I was like really interested in rereading him, going, that's not what he's talking about. He's like talking about flying his broom and being in the House Cup. Whereas to your point, Mel, the movie's kind of picked up on that. He needs family and he needs to remember that. So it's really interesting creative choices. And I like both styles, but I feel like in some ways maybe the filmmakers kind of went, like we need more of that. Like I can see what some of the people are talking about here.
Well, I think that's the normal, that'd be the normal response, because with kids, if he'd been raised by a substitute family where he felt emotional ties to that family, I don't think he would have the same desperation and attachment that he has for James and Lily in the stories. Yeah. Does anybody have anything else to say? Because I'm going to raise a new point, and it's totally off topic.
I was going to say something and now I've forgotten what it was.
We went too far.
You went too far down the rabbit hole, and I was about to say something, and then Sarah started, and I was like, I'll say it in a minute, and then I forgot what I was going to say.
I was going to say, though, Hermione's response to Lupin and the betrayal is actually, I think, what happens in the book more so than Harry's sense of betrayal behind it.
Okay. I'll be interested to get to that part.
Yeah, I haven't reread it yet, but that's what I seem to recall being what happens. So.
Yeah. Because I think because she was the only one who knew, I think she was really upset because he knew she knew, and she had sort of covered for him for such a long time. She felt that, I have this power over you and I didn't do anything about it.
Yeah. I do remember her screaming, they were your friends. I'd be interested to watch it again, and get to that bit.
Did you remember, Naomi?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I feel like in the book, part of the reason Lupin may not have spoke to Harry about, James and Sirius and Lily and sort of that period of his life is because I feel like before he comes back to Hogwarts, he's not really accepted by the Wizarding World as a whole and doesn't really have anyone to, be with or be family with and sort of process his grief of not only losing his two best friends to death, but losing his other friend as as the murderer of his other best friends, and Peter being killed as well. He lost everyone and he kind of was ostracized by the rest of the Wizarding World and didn't really have anyone to sort of process that grief with, and then he was suddenly in this place where he was surrounded by people, and especially with Harry reminding him so much of James and Lily, just sort of trying to process that grief without letting Harry know his grief is even there, kind of thing. I feel like that might be part of why he wasn't able to have that conversation so frankly in the book. I'm not saying it's an excuse, but I feel like that's part of the reason why he couldn't have that conversation that he really should have had, that he sort of did have in the movie.
I think that's valid, Naomi, because I'm thinking about how he is with Tonks in the future, and I feel like there's something in Lupin that won't allow himself to be happy, and won't allow himself to think that he's allowed good things and that he's allowed happiness, and it's almost like he punishes himself. And that whole relationship with Tonks, that, you know, and everything that goes down, that just, like, and that's really only in the books. She only really says that in the books. So I think, I actually really think, Naomi, you've nailed that, because it is referred to later that he never gets to process things. He thinks that if I'm happy, I'll lose it. Perhaps maybe that's where it's coming from. I'm not allowed good things, I'll lose them.
I think he's waiting for them to turn around and go, thank you, that's the phrase I was trying to think of. I think he's waiting for the other shoe to drop and for them to turn around and go, actually, you're a werewolf, I really don't like you.
Yeah, that actually makes perfect sense, because he didn't have these problems when he was at school, but then once he lost contact with his friends, he did have all these problems, and he had 12 years. Yeah. So in a lot of respects, even though it was Sirius who went into Azkaban, he had a similar experience where he was ostracized by society for that period of time. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Wasn't it 13 years?
So 13. We'll be. Don't get semantics.
Harry was one when he got killed. They got killed.
This is not my strong point. Okay. So the thing I want to raise. You're right. The thing I want to raise next is what I think is the biggest plot hole in the entire series. There's a few of them around. This one I think is the biggest one that never seems to get addressed, and that is Mr. Weasley's job. I'm sorry, but his job is a complete sham. They say that his job, the whole point of it, is that things that look like Muggle things shouldn't have magical elements in case by accident they fall into Muggle hands. Almost everything in the wizarding world is something that comes from the Muggle world that they've turned magical.
Yeah.
No, I thought his job was removing magical things from the Muggle world and making sure they didn't get into the magical world.
No, because he wrote a law with a loophole that said you couldn't create them. That's the point of the car, right? He wasn't supposed to make the car the way it is, but he made a loophole that as long as he didn't use it, it'd be okay.
Yeah, okay. I think I just glazed over that whole where, I had it in my head that his job was, look, I just had it in my head that his whole was to make sure that the magical objects didn't get out into the Muggle world and sort of, a clock didn't try and bite an old lady's hand off when she was winding it or whatever. Like, that was his job, making sure that magical things stayed in the magical world, and anything that was magical that went into the medical world, he made sure that it was taken out and people were obliviated and memories changed and whatever.
That's definitely part of his job. That's definitely the case.
I think that's how I glazed over that plot hole.
Yeah, because that's a big part of, that's really the action part that they describe. But the whole point of him getting in trouble over his car is the fact that he actually wrote the law that said the car shouldn't exist. But I was like, the whole world is breaking that law. I don't understand.
Yeah, you have a train that's going to Scotland, apparently, with no one seeing it.
Pens that do funny things. Yeah. Teacups that bite noses from joke shops. It's everywhere.
Agreed.
It's something like a car.
Sorry,
maybe it's more that the car has a sentient magic.
It is kind of an AI. That's true. And doesn't Molly say something about if you can't see how something how it thinks? Remember she talks about that?
Yeah.
Actually, it's Mr. Weasley that says that.
Oh, is it? I thought
it is.
I thought it was Molly who said that. Oh.
I'm 99% sure that he
No, I think you might be right. I think you might be right.
I think you're right. I think it is Mr. Weasley.
Yeah, maybe it's more
Yes,
of
by the way-
because it's so big it becomes sentient.
Yeah.
But then, well, we know why Tom Riddle's diary is sentient, but little things like the Marauders map and stuff like that, they get into these grey zones of what's sentient and
Yeah.
what's not. So
True.
But it was created to be like that. Like the Marauders map was
The
created
portrait.
to be sentient.
The portraits. All over the castle. There's all these people like hanging out, visiting one another, and having conversations with you about passwords. That's sentient.
Mm-hmm. Even the photographs, in some respects, could be considered sentient because they act like the people.
Yeah.
who
I
they
just
take
think
the
of them
photos.
as kind of more. I think of them as visiting gifs or gifs, depending on your pronunciation.
Well, they
Well,
can't.
in
Sorry, you go, Mel.
No, that's all I had to say.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say that paintings can't leave their, like, either their sort of, like, their frames, like, Dumbledore can go visit another Dumbledore frame, or he can visit other frames in the castle, but he can't just go to a painting in, like, the London Museum. Like, I feel
Right,
like
they have to
that's
stay
how they
within
get
the
through
walls.
that loophole.
Yeah.
Like, they have to stay within the magical walls of our dwelling or whatever. Like, they can't, just go to whatever painting they want to go to. And I feel like that's how it gets through the loophole. Like, things like that. Maybe.
Mm.
Look, I'm just creating reasons. I'm putting holes in my reasons.
Yeah, I just thought it was sound like a pretty crappy job in the first place, and it's quite obvious he doesn't have the influence and the power that would be more useful within the ministry. Like, that's kind of how
I think
because
he's
it's
just in
not
that job
that-
because he likes muggle things, and so he's in that job. That's all it's got to do with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I question whether the job should even exist. That's all. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
at
government.
least in its
You can
current
say that about a
form.
lot of things.
Yeah. But I mean, at least in its current form, should it exist?
Yeah, well, in its current form, yeah. Does anybody have anything else from the second book? Apart from Harry's inexplicable trust of Gilderoy at the end for some freaking reason.
Oh, that was one of my two other things.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. Like, he spent the entire book. Even Ron at one point says, did Lockhart do all these things he claims to have done? And then when they find out that he's going into the Chamber of Secrets, which is made quite clear that the teachers only did to make him bugger off while they figured out what they were going to do, why the hell did they go to Lockhart? It doesn't make any sense. What do they expect him to do?
Make him come along with them. He just got, it was obvious he was going to get in the way. I'm with you. I just was like, I remember thinking, why are they going to him? He's a waste of space. Just go do what you need to go do. And then they force him to come with them. And I'm like going, he's already made a freaking mess of everything else. He's going to make a mess of this. Why the hell? I'm with you, Karina. I just remember reading it going.
Maybe they were afraid
to make
that he would catch them and stop them.
But they throw his wand out of the window and he's leaving anyway.
That's right. So they force him to come with
why
them.
did you throw his wand out of the window? You need a wand that works.
Maybe they thought he was going to go tell the other teachers. I'm really good at just covering plot holes in YA books. Excellent at it. This is an A+ job that I do. YA books that have plot holes that don't make sense. I make up all sorts of excuses for it to make sense. Okay.
Naomi, we need you because otherwise we'd all be just sitting here digging at the holes, going, "Look at how big this is."
I don't know if you can see that. I saw this guy. I saw him. He's some rugby league dude. I'm not a really rugby league follower, but I don't mind watching a few games. And he turned up. I'm like, oh my god, it's Gilderoy Lockhart. Anyway, I need to share that. Des has like that.
Flopsy hair.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right.
No,
I think it was G who posted on Goodreads, and apparently the second book is her favourite. I was really hoping she'd be here so she could explain why.
Yeah. Actually, there were
it's
lots of
so
parts of the second book I loved. I have to admit that I confused some of it with the third book, and there were bits that I really loved. Like, I love the whole polyjuice, like brewing it and how long it took, and that bit I always really enjoyed, because that gets cut short, really short in the movies, and yet I really enjoyed that whole process. So there was lots of it I really loved. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Hermione
No,
being
there's
like
definitely-
part cat.
Yeah.
Poor Hermione. But I think that's the thing. The second book's not bad. It's not that I think the second book is bad. It's just that compared to the rest, it's the bottom for me.
Yeah.
That's all. It still has the fantastic charm and quirkiness of the series. So.
There was this quote that I highlighted. It was to do with the polyjuice potion stuff. When Hermione had bustled off to check on the polyjuice potion again, Ron turned to Harry with a doom-laden expression. Have you ever heard of a plan where so many things could go wrong? But to Harry and Ron's utter amazement, stage one of the operation went just as smoothly as he thought it would. So I wrote a note on here, which I'm trying to get up. And I went, oh yeah, my note.
Hermione. That's because Hermione is the true hero of these stories.
Yeah.
I just realised the reason that Harry and Ron couldn't get through the wall was because of Dobby, right? Like Dobby.
That's right.
Is that why no one noticed that they weren't there? Because elf magic is a lot bigger and
It's very strong.
It's very strong. Is that why no one noticed that they weren't there? Like, that could be why. Like, the teachers just went, yep, that's everyone, and got on the train and left. Because if Dobby was there to close the wall, that might be why no one noticed he was there. Look, I'm really good at covering walls, okay? But I just realized that could be why. Like, I'm not saying that it is the reason why, but it could be because he was the one that sort of blocked it off. And it is clearly stated in the book that the house elf magic is really strong. Like, he could have the power to sort of augment the sort of view of someone to think that they had all of the children that they needed to have.
Yeah. There's definitely ways that you could answer the questions. I just don't think that the answer is in the text.
I think they probably just came back and went, oh, the boys are gone, we'll just end the train because we have no choice and we'll find them when we find them. Oh, they're in a car in the sky because all these muggles have seen them. Brilliant.
Yeah. They were too quick to find a solution. They didn't even try an adult solution.
Of course they didn't. They could fly a freaking car.
Yeah, they wanted to do what they wanted to do, which was fly the freaking car.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like that's something that is the book, because it's written for children, and so from a children's perspective, doesn't acknowledge the fact that, yeah, maybe we shouldn't. They don't even feel particularly bad about it, I don't think. They feel bad that they got in trouble.
Well, it wasn't until halfway through the flight when the, like, invisibility cloaking thing stopped working.
Not even halfway, it's like 2 minutes in.
Yeah, that's why they get seen.
They could have gone, oops, and landed right then and there and done a lot less damage.
Yeah, but then they would have been driving on the streets of London.
Oh, God.
Well, they could have seen if Ron's parents had come up.
Driving.
Oh, God.
Have you seen people driving in London?
No.
Nah,
Is it
traffic
worse
is
than
no good.
Ireland?
It's no good. It's very busy. And I imagine two, like, 12-year-old boys that have never driven before wouldn't have exactly made for the best drivers on the streets of London. They probably did the safer thing.
In some respects, yes. Okay, guys, I'm moving us on to book 3.
Covering it up.
Book 3.
Book 3. Okay, I'm raising something first up that is completely, like, tiny, but I love the fact when I Rich please pointed this out. The first person who is acknowledged in these books as being sexy in any kind of way is Madame Rose Murta, who is probably in her 50s. How awesome is that?
It's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
I thought it was pretty cool. I would also like to point out that I realised reading this that Cedric Diggory is a seeker. Harry Potter is a seeker. Cho Chang is a seeker. This is a really incestuous group of people. Like, seekers can only date seekers. It's just
because they think themselves are so cool that they only like other seekers because they're the only people
I
cool
didn't
enough.
realise Cedric Diggory was a seeker. I knew he was and I didn't know Cho. I'd forgotten Cho was, but I was like, oh my god! When I was like, oh, okay, Cedric's a seeker. That's pretty cool. And then I was like, oh, Cho's the new seeker. And I was like, oh wow. Knowing what I know.
And none for Draco Malfoy.
And Draco Malfoy.
I was just going to say,
no.
and Draco
And
Malfoy
none
is
for
seeker.
Draco Malfoy.
No! All of the Harry for Draco Malfoy. Stop it!
No.
Now I feel like I need some fanfic where Draco and Harry talk about being a seeker together.
No thanks.
But they want to speak with each other, baby.
Oh god.
Look how hot he is on his broom, flying after that golden snitch.
Oh,
look how
his
he
broom,
catches it.
baby.
It's so hot and sexy.
So sexy on his broom. I just want to wax it.
Jesus Christ.
I don't know if you know this, but I wrote a lot of Harry Potter fanfic, and a lot of it was Harry Draco fanfic. A lot
No
of it.
way.
I mean, like 99% of it.
Oh,
I never understood people's interest in that one, but now that I've done like a whole heap of Sherlock stuff, I understand. I'm not necessarily into it, but I understand.
I don't necessarily need people to be into it.
I agree.
The way I see the world.
I was trying to explain to Nye the other day about the fact that I can have the original content be different to my own fantasy world of what I like about the story, and they don't have to meet, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I've just started reading this fic where it's basically a rewrite of someone who's in the class as Harry, but he's not any of the main characters. He's just in class with Harry, and it's just the life of a regular Hogwarts student in the year that Harry's in.
Like, I heard about that. It's really supposed to be really good.
It's freaking fabulous.
Right, Naomi, linkage in Lud, please.
Okay, let me see if I can find it.
No,
That's
you
so
don't have to
interesting.
do it right now, but at some point.
Because I was just thinking what I would love to like see is some kind of interview with perhaps with Lucius Malfoy, like after the last, like 10 years after the last book kind of thing. Like, so, you know, reflecting back, you know, obviously you now, what made him so attractive, and what was the turning point, and where did you kind of like start realizing you couldn't get out of this, and that kind of, like, I think that could be really interesting. Like that.
Yeah, that real open and honest communication from Lucius Malfoy.
Well,
it probably exists. Let me introduce you to Archive of Arrow.
Well, I suppose I always think about how at the end, like Lucius and what's his wife's name? Narinda? I can't remember. You know, like, at the end of it, they're just, you know, their whole priorities have changed, and they've realised that they're stuck in something they don't want to be part of anymore. And I just think it's really interesting. I think it would be interesting to try and kind of get into what their space was at that point and how they reflect on it now.
I'd actually be more interested in Lucius's wife, Draco's mum's perspective, actually, because
I would like that too.
Yeah.
Anyway,
really from Nelson's perspective.
So I like the fact that in the third book is the first one where I think J.K. Rowling is trying to communicate to her readership that you need to start paying attention to the clues.
Right.
Specifically, on the night bus, I can't remember the name, is it Stanley?
Stan.
Stan says he talks about muggles and about how they don't notice things. And what which Please talks about is the fact that that's actually a clue to the readers to start paying attention to all of the bits and pieces that are going on, not just Harry's perspective.
Mm.
I'm like, oh, is this when you sort of realise that you were actually doing a lot of things for the future, or did you know from the beginning? And you just think this is the right age for your readership to start paying attention.
Well, in the first one, Hagrid talks about being on Sirius Black's motorbike, and she gets addressed again in the third one, which I thought was interesting.
But see, notice that it wasn't until the third one that it's put in place that that motorbike wasn't actually Hagrid's.
No, he says it in the first one.
No, he says it in the first one. He says, young Sirius Black left me.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. So she was putting, like, she does say that she had a lot of the end goal in play from the very beginning. So, yeah. But for whatever reason, I feel like the third one's when she's trying to start getting people to actually pay attention to it all.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And especially that Harry is not very good at noticing things, even though he thinks he is, and it sort of makes it look like he is, but he's not. He notices the wrong things.
That's true.
Oh, hello, Lick.
Okay, that's not the one I've been reading, but it's been highly recommended to me. It's on my list to read. I'm just trying to find it in my history, because it's been a while since I read it.
Is it? I must admit, I've been spoilt by Archive of Our Own because you can download a copy.
Yeah, no, you can't do that on fanfiction.net. I'm sorry, but that story specifically has been highly recommended to me, so it's on my list of stuff to read. In other words, it's a tab that's been open on my Firefox for about 6 months.
I was going to say I'll just have to leave the page open because I hate bookmarking things I'm going to read.
Yeah, no, the tab has been open for about 6 months.
Mm.
Where are you guys?
In the
There's
chat
a link
inside.
on the chat.
I just don't know where I've put it.
If I go back a step, will I see you? No? That didn't work either.
Did you go
I'll
over
put
to
the link
left-hand
on.
side?
I'll put the link in the Facebook group as well. So, and I'll see if I can actually find the story because it should be in my history somewhere. It's been like a good 6 months since I've read it though, and I kind of got to the end and it hasn't been finished. So I don't know if it's I don't know if the story was ever finished, which makes me want to write my own. But
Whip?
I don't know.
No, not whips. Whips.
What? Whips? What?
Whips. It's a work in progress. Whip.
No, yeah, the one I'm talking about is a whip. But that one I didn't think was it?
Oh, no, the one you were talking about, because I'm like, that sounds interesting, I want to read it. But I try to avoid whips at all costs because it drives me insane when they're not finished.
I was going to say,
it makes me want to
knowing
write my
what we
own,
know
I
about your
don't-
series read, Mel.
I don't think it was ever finished, so it does make me want to write my own.
I'm the same. There's a Sherlock one which I absolutely adored, but it's never going to be finished because it hasn't been updated for about 2 years now or more. And you're just like, no, maybe I could fit. No. So yeah.
I have a story that hasn't been updated in about 2 years. Someone messaged me about a month ago asking me if I had another chapter to update it. So I feel really bad about that. I'm like, no, I do, but it's not very good. And she's like, can you just send it to me, like email it to me? I'm like, yeah, okay, you can have it. It's not very good though, I'm telling you now. It has not been edited at all. It is the worst. But she was happy, so.
I'm very respectful of the writer who's very generously written something for me, and I get that sometimes you just don't get to the finished stage, and that's okay. But that's why I avoid whips, because then I don't get upset or get disappointed. So. Although if I know that it hasn't been updated and I choose to go ahead, then I've got no one but myself to blame. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
sorry, I'll be 2 seconds. I need to let the cat out of the room.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to have to head off in a couple of seconds anyway because it's 11 o'clock here, after 11.
Yeah, I know. And I've got to get up really early in the morning, so I'm trying to see if there's anything really important. Oh. Okay,
sorry.
the these ladies argue that Trelawney actually gets all her predictions right.
From what I can see, yeah.
Yeah. All of her real predictions. Not her, like, and you're going to have a very good year at school, but her actual visions, all of them come true.
But there's only 2 of those that they know about, right? I'm talking about the stuff she does in class where she says, who is it? Lavender? What you
Lavender.
dread is going to come true. And,
16,
you know,
something, yeah.
I think
this
it's
can
lucky
such a random-
coincidence. I think it's lucky coincidence because she would have had this class for the last 13 years, 12 years.
Mm.
She would be used to children walking out of her class and calling her a hack. It's just a thing that would happen with that particular field of magic. If you take a room full of random people and predict one of them having a bad day on a certain day, it's probably going to happen. I think it's just random luck of the draw.
Mm.
It's
Or you forget that you even had that prediction because it was that far away. Like, she'd forgotten that she was supposed to be dreading something, and it just so happened that the day coincided.
and like one of your number will leave this class kind of thing, and Hermione leaves before Easter. Yeah.
But anyway, the ladies actually argued that all of them seem to come true, even if they do appear to be lucky coincidence. I want to argue that, well, the biggest thing she predicted was that Harry was going to die, and he didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, didn't she predict that you will die, not Harry Potter will die? And part of Harry Potter died because Voldemort died.
Yeah, technically he does die. That's true, he does.
The part of Voldemort that he's carrying within him dies.
Oh, so there you go.
Yeah.
So part of him technically does die.
Now I want to go back and check whether she said it within the year or whether it was just in general.
In general.
I thought it was in
I
general.
feel like it was in general. Interesting. It makes me want to reread the whole 3rd book all over again with all of her predictions and take notice of each of them, because I didn't take that much notice because I listened to them after that point, and I'm like, oh, now I need to go check.
Sorry.
But I don't care that much. No, I don't care that much. I really actually don't. It's just I feel like I have this sort of feeling like I'd like to, but I'm not actually going to because that's too much.
There's a Quora article on it. Hang on, I'm going to find you guys.
The other thing too is we were talking about Snape treating his students poorly. They were arguing that Neville actually gets treated worse than Harry by Snape.
I don't think it's so much worse than the fact that Harry at least kind of gets what's going on in potions because he has Hermione, whereas Neville doesn't get any help whatsoever, and because he struggles a little bit in general and he doesn't have that extra help from Hermione, he's really struggling, so he's just not getting it, which just frustrates Snape even more because he just expects that everyone should just get it, which I mean is partly his failure as a teacher. Like, he should be seeing students that aren't getting it and helping them work it out, but I feel like that might be why he sort of seems to get it worse, because he doesn't have that support system that Harry has. Like, he doesn't have someone being like, okay, you need to add this much of this and this much of this, and then you chop it like this and add it with this much stirring, and you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have someone breaking it down for him.
Yeah,
like, he has Seamus and you know, usually with him as they're like doing potions and stuff. Like, he doesn't have like someone who really goes into all the nitty-gritty parts of it.
No, that's a fair point.
Yes, maybe?
Scanning. Yep, no, I agree. Oh, this was something. Page 160 for me. There's actually a line in here where I think Harry shows for the first time that he's going to be seriously angry in book 5. And I thought it was good foreshadowing because
What did he say?
Oh,
We
oh,
do.
so you know, like we know, right? He's pretty happy and everything up until book 5, but he says, it's about when they find out about Sirius Black. Then he finds out that he's responsible for what happened to his parents and everything, and he says, I'll never know what they had wanted. About his parents. I'll never know what they have wanted because thanks to Black, I've never spoken to them," said Harry shortly. And just like that scene, but that line specifically, it's like, ooh, angry Harry. Harry's going to end up being angry person.
Also,
For good
he was
reason.
16.
Sorry?
He was also,
then
like,
it's pretty...
16.
Yeah, he's a teenager. Yeah, it's totally
Yeah.
normal that to go through that stage. But
I know,
like,
but
I'm sort of
it's a painful book.
yeah, it is. But I thought that was interesting because I was like, that is, I think, the first time you actually see that, because Harry's pretty tolerant of everything that happens to him.
Yeah.
I think,
Way
again, that
over
partly
time.
might be because of the Dursleys. Like, he didn't have any other choice but to stay there. So he just put up with whatever they gave him. And if they gave him any sort of love, then he was taking it in. So he was just very like, oh, you're treating me like shit? Well, that's how people just treat one another, isn't it? Like,
I have to go, guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
okay, bye, Sarah.
Oh, we didn't get to hear the movie comparisons. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, we did a few of those. I think my main one was the Azkaban stuff. It was just, yeah, I was quite, okay, my main thing was, first two, I was really impressed actually how literal they were, and then the third one, they took some liberties, but I actually really liked the liberties that were taken. I actually felt they really enhanced the story in a visual way. Like the fact is, like on the Marauders map, Harry never looks for, never sees, what's his face? In the book, he never actually sees, what's his face? The guy with the one toe.
Peter
Pettigrew.
Yeah, he never sees that, but it doesn't. When I read the book, I'm going, why wasn't he doing what he does in the movie, where he's just sitting there looking what everybody does? I would do that. So I was there was just basically, I liked some of the choices, and maybe I'll get to talk about them next time or something. I don't know. Anyway, gotta go to bed. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
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 I've forgotten what we were talking about before that now.
Oh, yeah, the way that Harry just lets whoever treat him however. Like, the reason he just accepts that people sometimes treat you like crap is because that's the way he's always been treated. Like, he doesn't, he takes the good when there is good, and when there's no good, well, he's just like, well, that's just the way things are sometimes.
I think this is the first time you sort of see that pushback behind that. Like, instead of just sort of accepting the way people are saying don't go after Black and that, now he's actually starting to go, well, hang on a tick, no, I'm not okay with this, and I'm angry about what happened with my parents and that sort of stuff, which I think is normal. But yeah, I thought it was interesting to come across that line with hindsight involved.
Yeah.
I've got other stuff, but I'm too tired. I don't care anymore. I have pages. I've got pages of notes. Pages.
Okay, well, what's the main thing you want to discuss from all of the notes that you have? Like, I mean, I feel like yeah, I feel like with Azkaban, they're like, if you're the worst of the worst, we're not going to kill you. We're just going to leave you with this like place that's just full of despair, so that if you ever get out, you are the worst person. Like, you are either batshit crazy, or you just have no care for anyone, or just pretty much just batshit crazy. Because everyone that got out of there, like Barty Crouch Jr., Bellatrix, Sirius, all of them were crazy in their own way. Like, it drove them all crazy after being there for that long.
I definitely agree with you in that, but I don't think it's just intended for those people, because they sent Hagrid there as a child.
Did they send Hagrid as a child? That's the part that really bothers me about Chamber of Secrets, because he's expelled for because Moaning Myrtle is murdered and is presumed up until Chamber of Secrets to be the heir of Slytherin who opened the chamber originally, because it's never proven otherwise. And then he's allowed to teach in this school. He's allowed to continue as gameskeeper in this school, even though he was basically accused of murder. And he wasn't sent to Azkaban for that. But he is sent to Azkaban when the same crimes start happening again.
No, because he mentions the fact that he's going back for a second time. So he went for a period the first time round, unless he went for some other reason that was not mentioned.
Was he?
Well, I thought he came back from Azkaban because Dumbledore was Dumbledore obviously knows it wasn't Hagrid that did it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like Dumbledore knew from the very, very beginning that it was Tom Riddle, and he just didn't tell anyone because he's a fucking jerk. But, you know what I mean?
Worst
he knew
ever.
He knew that it wasn't Hagrid. And that's why he had to, had to get Hagrid out of there, and that's why he was like, I will keep him here as the gameskeeper because I know he didn't do it. And you all trust me, right? I'm totes trustworthy. All of the trust.
It doesn't say anywhere that he went to Azkaban the first time. I think what you're thinking of is in when they're talking about Sirius Black, he says he wouldn't want to go back to Azkaban again after having been there because of Chamber of Secrets.
But that
because
would mean
he does
that
say that.
They sent him in the Chamber of Secrets to Azkaban based on the fact that things were happening, but had no evidence whatsoever this time round. So that's
exactly what happened.
Well,
that's exactly what happened. That's why it's sort of this weird sort of thing that he actually was accused of murdering Myrtle and didn't go to Azkaban because he was a child and was just expelled and then taken on as gameskeeper. But he was then sent to Azkaban as an adult because the same things were happening and they thought he must have been doing it. That's ridiculous.
Well, I think it's ridiculous he went either time, but I think he actually did go the first time too.
No, I just looked it up. He didn't.
He didn't?
No. He was just expelled and then taken on as gamekeeper because his father was already dead.
Yeah, but I thought Dumbledore says that he can't protect Hagrid this time round. I thought he said something along the lines of, I can't protect you this time, which to me seemed to say that he was trying to keep him out of Azkaban in this, in Chamber of Secrets, but couldn't because he didn't have enough, pull or whatever with the minister and stuff. They were like, no, this is happening again, and we trusted you last time, and it's happening again, so it must be him. We thought it was him the first time. Yeah, maybe.
That's the impression I had, but honestly, I can't find it right now, so I can't say. But that's certainly the impression I had, was that it wasn't his first visit. But it's also easy for me to have mistaken and mixed it up with another part of the story too, so I think either could be true. But regardless, both this time, Sirius Black I don't think is a good example because they at least seem to have evidence that time. But even Harry's concerned at the beginning of the third book that they might send him to Azkaban, which seems extreme. And yet when you realise what he's done, which is he's harmed another human being, might not be a very nice human being, but it was still another human being, and compared to Hagrid and what he did and why he got sent with no evidence whatsoever, I can see why he might think that it might not be okay. If you add that into the fact that they kill Buckbeak, they're going to kill Buckbeak for such a tiny little crime, I'm sort of like, the Wizarding World's really bad at how they check.
Well, I feel like with Buckbeak especially, because it was Draco and his dad is on the board of the school, he sort of pushed for.
At that point.
Wasn't he?
Pushed for it, yes.
He got kicked off the board at the end of Chamber of Secrets. The reason he has so much push in Azkaban is because he's actually pushing the Ministry workers, because the Ministry worker is a former Death Eater.
There's a difference, though, between there's a difference between getting someone taken out of a school by the school board and actually having the ministry put him into Azkaban.
Yeah, but I mean, with
talking about Buckbeak.
Yeah, I'm talking about Buckbeak because it's
sorry.
not a wizard, you know. With him pushing, saying, "Look, this, this animal, mauled my child. It shouldn't be on school property. It should be killed." And they were obviously like, "Oh my God, it mauled a child. We need to, like, do you know how the government is? Like, oh my God, it did this thing. Oh my, we have to get rid of it straight away."
But the thing is that, like, we're talking about, they describe it. It's actually a control of magical creatures board. So it's not just one or two people. It's a board of people. So, we're talking maybe 6 people. I don't know. I'm having a guess here, who all agree that we should kill him, not find a new, not rehome him, not segregate him, not kill him based on Lucius Malfoy only. How corrupt is this government?
He's unsafe. He's inhuman flesh. Unsafe. Kill it. Kill it with fire.
He didn't kill anybody. He hurt a child. So he's not being segregated. He's not being. God, the dragons do more in the 4th book to the.
We put down dogs for a lot less, Mel.
Sorry?
We put down dogs for a lot less. It happens all the time. A child aggravates a dog and we put the dog down. It happens constantly.
Very, very true.
I would argue that that's definitely the case when they're young children, and I definitely don't agree with it. But we're talking about a teenager here.
Same thing stands though. Like, if a dog bites, if a dog bites a person, like, and mauls them sufficiently enough that they'll need stitches or whatnot, there is a high chance that the dog will be put down, no matter what the human person did. Because the dog is now labelled as vicious. I'm not saying that it's right, and I'm not saying we should do it, but that's probably like this where she was coming from with why Buckbeak was being killed. Because he was being put down because he was an animal and he's hurt a student, And I'm sure that
your logic. I might not agree with it, but I can't argue with it.
I'm not saying that it's right or that I think that that was the thing that should be, but I feel like that's where she was coming from.
I'm saying that I feel like it was not an investigated enough circumstance. They didn't look like there was a lot of other evidence provided, and they didn't really consider it at all, and things on those lines. And I just feel like
when children are bitten by dogs, though, like.
Well, what I'm saying though is there's constant, like, this is related to the Azkaban part for me. There's constant evidence of a lack of due diligence around how they actually go about punishing creatures, people, all of that throughout the government. I think it's very corrupt.
I mean, it's shown by, like, book 5 or 6 how many of the people in the actual ministry are working for or have been working for Voldemort, or at least in conjunction
or at least
with
that
the group. Yeah, like, a lot of people in the ministry support either Voldemort himself or at least support the idea that his ideas aren't super crazy.
Even if you have a look at when... Sorry.
Okay.
Even if you have a look at when Harry got his letters saying that he performed underage magic and it was Dobby, no one turned up to ask Harry if he had actually done it. It was just assumed because he's the only wizard in that area that it was definitely him. It's just not the best system in the world, really.
I mean, they would have been easily able to tell if it was him performing the magic or not, because they would have used, done the thing with his wand that says what was the last spell that he cast, and they would have been able to see that the spell that was cast was not from his wand. But they just assumed straight away that, no, it must be him. Because the government is against Harry and his people, because so many of them are working for or in conjunction with the, the pure blood people or Voldemort.
It's definitely and certainly the case. One of the things that I was sort of leaning towards with all of this was the fact that they use Dementors in Azkaban. Is that their way of disassociating themselves with punishment? because Dementors are awful. Like, everybody hates them. And they, rather than trying to deal with people that they should be punished, that they need punishment, they just sort of hand them over to these awful, awful people, regardless of what level of their crime.
I feel like part of it might be that that's their way of controlling the Dementors. They're like, we will give you, you know, people that you can feed souls off or whatever, and in return you will keep them in this island. Like, that's sort of the process that they have. It's like they keep them there on that island and they're not sort of destroying all of England, and like that's how they keep them there, like instead of having to sort of work out how to wipe them all out kind of thing. Like, I think it's maybe not so much the prisoner point of thing, but it's their way of going, like, it's like when England was sending convicts to Australia. It didn't matter what you did. You could have stolen a loaf of bread, but you were still going to be put on a boat and sent to Australia for, you know, you on a boat for 6 or 8 months, then sent to Australia to be working the land or doing whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't matter what your crime was. You were being sent.
But see, that actually goes directly into my point, in that that's something that they were doing as a morally okay thing to do in the 1700s. We're talking about the 1990s. We're supposed to be at a higher level of what we do and taking responsibility for how we do things. And I'm questioning whether the Wizarding World is doing that, and that
maybe that's what J.K. Rowling was trying to show us, that they weren't doing right. Like, maybe she's taken different things. She's taken different things from different points in history and sort of used them as a point to say, this is what the Wizarding World is doing wrong. Like, the house elves, for example. Like, obviously the house elves are meant to represent slaves in general, and, you know, how wrong it is to keep slaves and how, you know, we should free them. Like, or how we did free them and how the wizards should. And I think maybe it's the same sort of thing with, like, you know, their prison system and their just governmental system in general. Like, it seems to be that it doesn't work the way that a normal government system would. Like, they don't vote in the minister the way that we would vote in a prime minister. Like, it's more the government seems to vote in their minister of magic. Like, it doesn't seem to be that wizards in general vote for their minister, or at least that's not what it seemed like, unless it was just because it was in war. I don't know. I'm not sure that they really ever sort of say how someone becomes minister of magic. They only really talk about their popularity. You know what I mean? Like, it's very, like, it's very incestuous with everyone within the ministry is just within the ministry, and you have to sort of know someone to get in, kind of thing. Like, Harry and Ron became Auroras because they knew. Like, the minister was like, I want Harry Potter as an Auror, so they became Auroras. Like, No,
I think
all I'm trying to... Go, Karina.
I think that also you have to consider how much sway the pureblood families still had at that point, because they'd all integrated back into normal wizarding society after Voldemort had disappeared the first time. There would have been a lot of rejection of, like, yes, they don't need a lot of Muggle technology, but we do have things that are helpful. Even by the 90s, we had inventions that would have been helpful in their society that they just didn't use. And I think that would have come from the pureblood saying, we don't want any Muggle technology, we don't need the Muggle technology, they're dumber than us. It's that, you know, that very clear segregation of society, and part of that would have trickled into the prison system. Like, yes, we now have systems to try and rehabilitate people depending on the severity of their crime, obviously. Whereas there's just no talk of rehabilitation. Hagrid hadn't even done anything and he was sent to Azkaban. Sirius, yes, he murdered 13 people in a street, but, you know, Barty Crouch hadn't murdered 13 people in the street. He was only complicit. You know, it doesn't really look at this level of severity of people's crimes and then go, okay, you're going to be in here for this duration of time, but we're going to provide you with these skills to, you know, get you back into wizarding society at some point. And I think that that has a lot to do with the purebloods and how much sway they still had, especially in the ministry. Look at Lucius Malfoy.
Mobile phones. Anyone want to, like, call your wizarding friends? Like, what?
Well, they
Oh,
do
it
talk
has the
about
Blue Network.
they do talk about the fact that Muggle technology doesn't work well around magic. Like that's something that is actually addressed in, I think, the later books. So that is sort of addressed in some respects. But if you guys are curious about this world changing in terms of that sort of thing, read Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. Very, very good. Really does fun things with the tropes.
I just feel like, from like a magic point of view, muggles that went to Hogwarts would eventually find a way to be able to have their muggle things with their magic, like their TVs and their CD players and their mobile phones. Like, eventually they would find a way to work those items in with their magic. Like,
I agree.
especially someone like Hermione. Like, if she was given a mobile phone by her parents, she would find a way to be able to use that freaking phone everywhere. There would be no
I
place
wouldn't
she
have
could
gone to
not use that
Hogwarts
phone.
if I can't take my CDs with me.
Yeah, like, she would have just found a way to do it. Like, especially since she would have given her, like, access to the internet, which would have been, like, all of Muggle technology, like, all of Muggle information that she could possibly want on tap.
I agree
She would
entirely.
have found a way.
I think the reason that there's no technology in these stories is because it's the late 90s. Mobile phones are only just starting to really become like an everyday item, and J.K. Rowling didn't want to have to deal with it, didn't know how to do it.
She actually set her book 10 years earlier than that. The first book takes place in 1991.
Exactly. So when you take that into consideration,
Yeah,
it's not even so much that it's that I think she was not in a mind space ready to deal with it. We look back on it and reflect on it and go, where are these things and why would you go without them? Because they're so much better than what they've got from even if
mostly just.
But then we complain when they are in books, like the book series that we were supposed to read last year. That all we did was complain about the use of technology in that first book because it was just so shonky and out of place.
Maybe it wasn't so much. I can't remember enough because it's been too long. It's been a year. But I feel like perhaps it wasn't so much that it was used too much, but more like it was used
poorly. Yeah, very poorly.
And I think that's what J.K. Rowling was trying to avoid with these books. Like, rather than doing it wrong, she's trying to not do it at all, basically, and have an excuse for why not.
Yeah,
but even by the end of the 80s, like, we had beepers, we had microwaves. There were things that, like, we had invented things that would have been helpful, and luxury things like CD players and stuff like that. That, you know, they just make life a little bit more enjoyable. Yeah.
Well, I find it very hard to believe that these kids are at school and the only form of entertainment they really have is book reading, and yet they never even talk about reading novels, ever.
Don't you know about the outside, Mel? They go outside and play like children do.
No, they do, but I mean, like, I'm talking entertainment, like, not play.
They don't engage with media.
Sorry?
They don't engage with any media. Like, the media you engage with when you're a teenager is such a big part of growing up. The books that you read when you're a teen, the music you listen to, the TV shows you watch, they are such a huge foundational part of who we become that for that not to be there is just a little bit odd.
Well, they do listen to music through, like, their radios and stuff, don't they?
Well, but they never mention doing it at school.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they do. In, maybe it's book 4 or book 5 when they, like, redo the Chamber of Secrets and they're hiding down there, and maybe I'm thinking of a fanfic and I'll stop now.
Yeah, I think you are.
No, in the Room of Requirement, they talk about having, like a gramophone style thing with like a disc thing with and stuff like that, like a radio, and talk about listening to radio stations.
They talk about, like, in the 7th book in particular, they talk about having radios and listening to radio stations, but there's no just general enjoyment media consumption. The radios are being used for news and relevant articles and discussion on what's going on in the world. There's no just, like, Hermione is a massive reader. Why does she never seem to be reading a Pride and Prejudice or something along those lines?
Molly Weasley does listen to the radio at one point because there's a romance singer or something that she's really into, but that's at home.
Exactly,
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's only ever at home. It's at school for most of their lives.
Because I think again it's the problem that we see the story through Harry's eyes, but I'm sure we hear about it by proxy with Ginny and maybe like Pavati and Lavender talking about a radio station they were listening to with like beauty tips and stuff. If it was a magazine or something. They were talking about something.
He grew up in the Muggle world. How was he not like into, I don't know, who was big at the end of the 80s, like New Kids on the Block or Wham or whatever?
Where would the only thing from the Muggle world that is outside, that is some sort of form of entertainment is, I think, Seamus talking about football.
Oh, that's true.
I mean, Harry was very had nothing. He only saw like parts of TV shows from around the corner and that sort of stuff. And I think that's part of his problem anyway. Like he never had stuff.
Yeah. I think it's just something that she hasn't chosen to address. I mean, she mentions singers because, like, in the fourth book, they have a important band that comes and play at the tribe with
Selena Warbuck or something, Buckbeak, Selena something Beak, I think, in book 5, yeah.
That's who Molly Weasley's into.
No, I'm thinking about the band who's playing at the ball.
Yeah.
And they all seem to know who it was and stuff like that. But you know what I mean? Like, there's bits and pieces around, but it's really kind of weirdly absent. The Weird Sisters, that's it.
The Weird Sisters.
The Weird Sisters, that's who it is, yeah.
I always thought was a nod to Terry Pratchett.
Yeah, I think so.
Anyway.
See, I didn't get that. I thought it might have been a nod to Twisted Sister.
Maybe both.
Maybe both.
Yeah, anyway, look, it's just sort of a thing that I sort of notice that it's missing sometimes. It's like, where's the media? Like you said, Karina, the media.
I mean, part of it's probably that because, again, we only see it through Harry's eyes, and he's so busy being Harry Potter and doing stuff like chasing Voldemort and, trying to get clues for the Triwizard Tournament and, running around and doing things that not the average student's doing, that we don't see what the average student does. And that's why it feels like the story isn't full enough.
I definitely agree with you. I definitely agree with you from Harry's point of view. He's probably not experienced much of it before, and so he might not be seeking it now, and that he might be more physically inclined. But Ron has been part of the wizarding world all his life, and he mentions virtually nothing, if anything, that is media-related, entertainment-related. And just Hermione is... Yeah, that's it. And it's only a mention of them, never talks about their results or what's going on with them or anything. And Hermione, again, massive reader, and yet nothing mentioned or even just in passing of her consuming anything outside of what at some point she starts reading the newspaper. So,
well, I feel like if she was reading something like Pride and the Prejudice, it's not something she would tell Harry she was reading. It's not like she would be like, I'm reading this really good book. It's called Pride and the Prejudice. It's from the Muggle world.
But see,
I feel like
she constantly mentions what she's reading. She constantly mentions, J.K. Rowling constantly mentions what she's reading, and Hermione doesn't bring it up in conversation, and it doesn't have any bearing on what's happening at the time. She constantly brings up what she's reading. But
it's more just magic stuff, though, that she's bringing up. It's not like she's sort of talking about every novel that she's ever read, ever. She's reading a lot more than the books that she's mentioning.
Yeah, we definitely know that, but that's what I mean. Random books that she's reading, it's always educational based. So that's all I'm saying. She often mentions little details that gives more fullness to the life of what they're living, but that one's never mentioned, like something. But anyway, I am being rather picky bringing it up too, so I know that.
Cover it up. Just cover it up.
All right, guys, it is 20 to midnight, and I have to get up at 6. We need to go.
Okay. I was just starting to look at the time going, it's really late for you guys. You should probably go to bed. I mean, it's
I
only
don't have
10
anything
minutes
to
for
do.
me, so...
Once I realised G wasn't coming, I probably should have tried to schedule this to start at 8 instead.
Yeah, but she's in Queensland at the moment anyway.
No,
And she's in Queensland at the moment, so that was her 7 o'clock.
Once I realised what was going on there, I should have actually thought it through, but I didn't. I didn't even consider it. I've just been too busy lately to consider anything logical. So all my logical's reserved for work. Oh, well. Okay.
I'm sorry, I could keep talking about this for like forever, so we should stop.
Yeah, I'm with you. I could keep finding little things like that constantly and still absolutely adore the books. So it doesn't matter. I know. We just got to wrap it up at some point. And this is it. Okay, guys. So Full on the Hill next month for Sarah's pick. If anybody's joining us. Awesome. Alrighty then. Enjoy your month. Oh, by the way, if you guys checked out what Sword and Laser's reading next month, they've got a vote on at the moment.
No, I haven't.
Looked.
I've had so many books that I'm trying to read from Land Down Under, plus I want to try and read more vaginal fantasy this year, plus I'm just taking random books from the library. Like, I'm going to the library once a week and just taking 2 books and trying to read them.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's a good way to get a bit more variety. I'll just mention it. They're reading N.K. Jemisin, who her new series, the first one is called The Fifth Season. She's the one who did the 100,000 Kingdoms, which we read for Vaginal Fantasy, which was really, really good. And also A Darker Shade of Magic, which has got a lot of buzz at the moment, is also the second choice. Yeah.
Okay,
It's got
I'll
a really
have a look,
pretty
see if I can get them from the library or something. That'd be good.
So it hasn't been, well, my library's got both of them, so I've ordered them both, and pretty much whichever one wins, I'll read. So I'm just sort of going to start putting out feelers to see if anybody wants to have a Sword and Laser hangout sometime next month. So, yeah.
I'll try and get the books from the library, and if I can, I will read them.
Awesome. Well, it's just one. It's up for vote at the moment. They did they call it March Madness. They do brackets and you do votes between. They have 8 votes.
They've got March Madness basketball over in the States, so it's a big thing over there. Yeah. Yeah,
I've never even heard of it before, but I understand the voting system. So they started off with 16 books. We're down to the final 2 now. So, and they've done pretty well.
Both, and whatever one wins, I'll read. So, or at least I'll try if I can get the books.
Yeah. All right, well, I'll post up a thingy in Lud and see if we've got a few takers, and we might have a hangout for that one as well next month.
Cool.
Alrighty, guys. I will see you next time. Have a good month.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good month.
Bye.
Bye.